change of landscapes outside the window, kaleidoscope of new faces, communication with a variety of people. This is the ride on a long-distance train. That's why a lot of people love traveling the road. But for Emily, it's a job. She is a conductor on such a train. And for her, the road is a separation from her young son, taking care of passengers and troubles. Sometimes problems, sleep deprivation, but pleasure too. Of course, the clatter of wheels sometimes brought sad thoughts about her son. She longed, thinking how he was growing up without her. Where to go if you could not get a good education because of early marriage? A decent job, close to home cannot find. From the marriage left only a son and pennies alimony. I have to live on something, as there is no one to rely on. The only soulmate is Trixie's sister, but she has enough problems of her own. So most of the help is moral. So I went to the railroad. It's a good salary, and you can always work part-time. And the work is interesting, not so hard. It's not like her mom had to lay ties. That was work. So the poor woman didn't live long enough to reach 50. And the work of a conductor is nothing compared to that. And problems, well, there are problems everywhere. That's what work is. Where can you go without it? In general, their whole family was connected with the railroad. Father was a machinist, too, all over the country. So he was rarely seen at home. Mother also considered her marriage a failure, whether there is a husband or not. But my sisters loved my father. His arrival was always a holiday, but he left early too. In fact, the failed marriage, of course, had done a lot of blood to Emily Tighe, and everything else was forgivable. But the fact that the house, which his own grandmother Emily bequeathed to Emily, sued, that's what he seriously failed. I mean, she thought she was going to have a place to live. And not just a house, but a plot of land with a vegetable garden and outbuildings. How much effort she put into it. How she loved this house and her grandmother and mother-in-law. God rest her soul, before her death she said, "I bequeath everything to you, Emily, to you and your Johnny. That bastard Greg won't get anything. He'll be wasted anyway. He's such a piece of junk. He's just like his father. You'd better chase him off while you're young. You'd need a good man, and you'd be all right." And so she did, writing a will for Emily soon after the death of Greg, whom she had long suspected of cheating, in the same house, and caught Emily with his mistress. So I decided to fulfill my grandmother's wishes. Break up. I could kick him out. But he didn't. He went with some documents and certificates to shake, to prove that his grandmother, Annie Igorovna, was not in her last years, and Emily, almost with a knife to her throat, forced her grandmother to write such a will. That was my own grandmother, my late mother's mother. It is clear that she wanted to leave me the house, and this snake, while I was at work, abused my grandmother, so she forced her. And how much effort and money have I put into this house? My ex-wife only knows how to walk, so now Emily and her son had to rent an apartment, and that too without work and part-time jobs nowhere. And there was no hope to save up for some housing of their own, because you have to pay for rent and hire a nanny to look after your son while she was on a trip. Not to mention the fact that you have to live on something. That's the way it is. On the next voyage, she immediately sensed that there would be trouble. At the station, a pregnant woman entered the carriage, and her husband saw her off. You look, as if something did not happen, she thought unhappily, seeing how the woman's husband drags and places the luggage. In parting, he admonished his wife. "Here you go, Stacy. A separate compartment. You'll have a smooth ride. Call me as soon as you get there. Say hello to everyone for me. And here are the presents, remember what's for whom. And call me right away, don't forget." And he didn't forget to address Emily. "My wife is pregnant, as you can see. Please, please be careful. I don't know what's going on. I'll be very grateful." And he slipped a few bills into his pocket. Thank you for that, of course. But it's the fact that Johnny's sending him out with a belly like that and no escort. He realizes that anything can happen, but he says, "Go on, dear. Say hello. And in case of what happens, who's to blame? The conductor. They'll remember that you paid for it. Oh, those men, you put your treasure in the car and goodbye and goodbye. And if you approach them, they'll make big eyes saying, 'What's the big deal? They used to give birth in the fields. You should try it yourself, at least in the field. At least in the forest." Emily thought unhappily, remembering and passing the courses of guides. But what courses were there? Just a few classes, one of which talked about first aid and childbirth, but few people listened. Everyone laughed more. And the teacher herself reassured, such cases are very rare. Besides, there is bound to be at least one doctor or nurse in your carriage or in a neighboring one, so let's hope that everything will be all right for you. Let's hope so, Emily decided. The train touched down, rolling along. She looked in on a particular passenger, offered coffee or tea, asked how she was doing and feeling. "Don't worry, everything is fine. I don't need anything yet," the woman smiled. The face was indeed calm. Nothing portended trouble. Emily, having calmed down, went about her business. But could one cause for concern be dismissed? The next station added to the strangeness. Emily saw an elderly man trying to board the train. He tried one carriage, no luck, and then he got to her. Not only was he without a ticket, but he was blind. Well, you can't let the blind go without an escort. It's like everyone's conspiring today. Pregnant or disabled, she thought. Clothed, obviously not very well, but clearly not a vagrant. A clean, pleasant face, about 60 years old. "I didn't have time to take a ticket, but I have money. I'll pay," he asked. "Why are you alone?" Emily asked. "I don't have anyone to escort me. I haven't had time to hire anyone either." She couldn't refuse, so she let him in. And only then did she gasp. No seats. In one compartment there were, but there was a mother with 3 children, where they could not take another one, and even a blind one. The other compartments are not the same. Her partner took her aside. "What are you doing, Emily? It's not enough that you have one pregnant woman who's about to give birth. You let this one in too." It was such a quiet flight. No drunks, no company. But no, you're just going to get in with your mercy. What if there's an inspection? Come on, if anything, blame it on me. I can't throw such a man off the train. And what a weather. Look, it's starting to rain again. Don't we have no conscience at all? How can an already unfortunate man freeze on the platform? But she quickly realized that the pregnant woman was traveling alone in the compartment, and here Grandpa is quiet, clean, calm, will sit in a corner. He can't see anything, but he won't be noticed. "Let's go," she took him by the elbow. "I'll make you comfortable." "What station are you going to?" "Who are you going to?" Grandpa named the destination, said that he was going to go on to his son. "Why doesn't he see you off?" Emily wondered. "I'll meet you there," the passenger sighed. "What's your name?" "Archie. You can just call me Uncle Eric," he grinned. His face was tense, suggesting he was blind as a result of some misfortune, not born that way. Emily peeked into the compartment at the pregnant woman. "Hello again. Ellen, sorry. I didn't recognize your middle name." "It should just be Ellen. What's the middle name?" The passenger smiled again. "I'm fine. Don't worry. The deadline hasn't come up yet. It's just that I have 2. So much for the big belly." Emily sighed to herself, but spoke of something else. "I'm sorry, Ellen. We have this thing." And she explained the problem of a blind grandfather who simply had no place to put him. "Why don't you take Archie as your traveling companion?" Ellen was even nicer than she seemed. "Yeah, sure. Let him go. Do I mind? I don't think we'll be in each other's way." That's how well it all came together. They'll both get there without a problem. Matthew shouldn't worry. Grandpa's really nice. You can see he's intelligent. White, clean hands, thin fingers. Maybe he's a musician. They say blind people have good hearing, but I don't know what happened to him. It's not Emily's job to figure it out. The main thing is that she didn't take the sin on her soul, didn't leave the unfortunate man in trouble at the station. She would have suffered herself if she had refused. Everything was really quiet from then on, and in general in the carriage and in the compartment where there were passengers, inspiring anxiety. Emily looked in on them, offered tea and snacks, but the lady had all her own, and the blind passenger politely refused everything, and indeed sat on the edge of the bunk, like a shadow. "So at least have some sweet tea. Why sit like this?" "All right, I won't refuse tea," he replied, but that was the end of all his requests. There were no stops during the night, no problems or accidents either. And Emily was about to decide that she could take a nap when some frightened girl knocked on the compartment door. "Oh, do you have a connection here?" There is an uncle, blind, says that an ambulance is needed, or at least a doctor. Something's happened there. I didn't realize it was water. Emily had just realized what the water was. She found her partner, told him to radio the trainmaster and announce that a doctor was needed. And she herself rushed into the compartment to the pregnant woman and the blind man, inwardly lamenting, "Oh, the problem is hard. You have to go to the station. You can't wait. She'll give birth. I wish there was a doctor or someone else." And the compartment moaned, clutching the corner of the pillows with her teeth. Ellen Archie soothed her. "Don't be nervous. It doesn't happen that fast. Help will come. The main thing is to calm down and listen to me. Uncle Erich, I still have 2 weeks to walk. It hurts. Help." She looked hopefully at the guide who looked in. "It's all right. They'll make an announcement now, find a doctor, and everything will be fine. How are you doing here? Are you having contractions or something?" "Yes, but I'm afraid we won't get to the station." "A quick labor," the man said softly, soothingly. "And in the meantime, get what you need ready. Clean underwear of some sort. There's a first aid kit, isn't there?" "I've got everything. I'll get it all right away." Emily marveled at Archie's calm, confident tone. He sounded like an experienced doctor might give orders, even if he'd been a professor 3 times before. What's the use of that now? The poor guy can't see, she thought, as she took what she needed. She returned to the compartment, where things, by all appearances, were already going to labor. Now someone will come," she said confusedly, as she watched Archie's sensitive hands examine the laboring woman. "Well, while we wait, you, Emily, sanitize your hands for both you and me. Not everyone here wants to wait," he said sternly, surprising the conductor again. "Open up. It's coming soon." Alone on his feet. "And how do you know? Are you a doctor?" asked the astonished Emily. "Yes, I used to be a surgeon. But I used to deliver babies, too. Still had eyes, though." "Let's try it blind. You'll have to be my eyes and hands." "Oh, Mommy. I don't know how to do anything." Emily was afraid, but she pulled herself together so she could do it. "The main thing is to listen to me." There was no doctor or anyone related to medicine in the whole train. And Emily, on shaky legs and drenched in sweat, had to deliver a baby for the first time in her life, and not a simple one. It was multi-layered. Later, Annie herself could not remember what and how she did, but there were 2 new people in the compartment, boys alive and well and screaming loudly. They were placed on the chest and belly of their mother, who in a joyful voice, forgetting pain and fear, began to give thanks. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Emily, crying loudly and laughing with happiness and relief, sat down next to her, holding the babies. She loved them so much, as if she had given birth to them herself. "It's you 2 who are my saviors. I would have died without you. 2 badger boys. I would have given them your names." "No, you wouldn't. A boy could be Emily, too. So there will be Archie and Emily," the mother said in a weak, happy voice. "Oh, what am I if it hadn't been for Uncle Erich? I couldn't have done it. I had no idea what to do," Emily sobbed. "You're a good boy, Archie. Your eyes don't see, but your hands remember everything. You must have been a good doctor." "It's been a long time," the man sighed, also wiping away a tear. The door to the compartment opened ajar. The second conductor, without going in, asked, "Well, what's up there?" "Everybody's alive." "Who was born?" Alive. We have 2 boys." "Come in and see," Emily replied. "Come on, what's there to see?" "I was afraid to pick mine up anyway. I just came by to tell you we're pulling into the station and there's an ambulance waiting. They'll take you to the hospital right away." "I won't forget you. And my husband will thank you. I'll tell everyone how you saved me and my children." Helen hurried away. "Here's my cell phone. Don't lose it. Give me yours, too." "Don't worry. We're interested in how your boys will grow up," too, Emily assured her. The young mother and her children were dropped off at the station and taken to the maternity hospital. Emily gathered Archie into her compartment and poured tea. "Yes, and adventures on the road," she said. "And really, if it hadn't been for you, it would have been a disaster for Ellen and her boys. As it is, they are all alive and well. God willing, they will grow up to be good people. We'll be here soon. I live in the same town. Will your son meet you? I want to meet him at the cemetery. He's dead. We had an accident. He's gone. I went blind. I wish I had died right away, too, the passenger replied, pounding his fist on his knee. Oh, that's how it is. Well, if you had died, 3 more could have died today. But you see, you're alive. So you're needed. You survived here for a reason. Since we're going to the same city, my flight's ending. I'll take you to the cemetery. Okay? Don't you have any family at all? Emily felt sorry for this elderly and apparently very nice man in such a difficult situation. That's the thing. No one. I used to be fine. Now I wasn't just a good doctor. I had my own clinic. I was making money. I did something stupid. I married a young woman. My wife is Wolin's mother. Our son died a long time ago, and then this happened to us. Wolin was gone. I was between life and death for a long time, and then it turned out I wouldn't be able to see anymore. And while I was in that state, Yuji took over the clinic, and somehow she turned it around so that she turned all the people against me. Don't ask. I don't know how. So now all I have left is my son's grave, so I went to see him. And then, well, yes, there are people there, maybe Archie said calmly, as if he'd been through something long ago. What's the matter with you? I don't know what you're up to, but you can't do that. Emily didn't know how to comfort her new acquaintance, but she realized that he was really going through a hard time. Why don't you stay at my place for a while? Go to the cemetery, stay a while, and then we'll see. We still need to know how ours are doing. Their mom's good, Vincent, and it's good that she met you. You'd make a good medic, by the way. And don't worry, I'm not going to end my life. At least not in a way that's going to upset or scare or set anyone up. I don't listen to what I'm saying. Once in town, Emily took Archie to her place, introduced him to her son, and soon they were driving to the cemetery. On the way, he talked about Voland, who also became a doctor, worked in the clinic of his father, and gave great hopes. What a pity. He probably would have saved a lot of lives, to Emily sighed. Yes, he followed in my footsteps, but the path was shorter, and the worst thing is that in his personal life, I think he repeated my failures in many ways, Archie sighed. He didn't get married in time, though something was going to happen, and even more than once. He wasn't young anymore, but he was secretive. I only introduced him to my first girl. It was right after high school. My mother and I were against early marriage, but they didn't really want to be together without us. They split up. I don't know why. It was the same for me. I split up with my first sweetheart, with my wife Volin's mom. I lived like that, out of obligation, for my son's sake, and so that I wouldn't be alone. Then she died, and I got involved with that old fool Eugenie, and I was alone. That's what I should do. The cemetery, of course. Emily helped Archie find the grave. She led him to a bench. I'll be out of your way. You sit here and talk to him, and I'll be right over here. When you get up, we'll go, she said. Thank you, Vincent. What would I do without you? I don't know, Archie answered. Emily stepped back and wandered between the graves, reading the inscriptions on the monuments and wiping away tears. She felt sorry for the lonely old man. Pity for those who lay beneath the ground, and for those who left inscriptions on the stone to testify to their grief. Glancing from time to time at Archie's slumped form, she suddenly noticed that a boy, small like her son, was coming up behind him. Well, that is, about 6 or 7 years old. In his hands he held an inexpensive bunch of artificial flowers. The man must have heard his footsteps and looked back. Emily also hurriedly approached and heard the conversation. Who is here? Grandfather asked. No, I'm Erich, said the boy. I just came to visit the grave. That's right. That's my dad. Who's that? Archie put his hand on the monument. Yeah, that's what my mom told me. We used to come here together. Can't you see it at all? Did you come to see him too? The little boy asked with childish curiosity. I am his daddy. Where's your mom, and who is she? What's her name? My mom's name is Maggie, but she's in jail now, and I was in an orphanage and escaped. And since you're my daddy's daddy, that makes you my grandfather. Why don't you take me out of the orphanage? I can live with you, and help you." Tears were ringing in the child's voice. Emily, her heart breaking with pity at the scene, came closer and asked, "What's going on here, Vincent?" "I don't know. I think I found my grandson Archie," replied Maggie. "Yeah, I remember my son had a girl like that, but I never saw her. All I heard was them talking on the phone. And then I don't know what happens next. I don't know how to make sense of it all. Is it really true? What am I supposed to do with all this?" Archie was confused. Emily was, too. She shifted her gaze from the boy to the photograph of the dead young man and saw that there was a resemblance, but it would be premature to draw any conclusions from that alone. And anyway, what could be done with all this? "So well, friends, let's go home and tell each other all about it. And I'm getting a little cold standing here too." "You're not dressed for the weather," Eric said Emily. "I ran away from the orphanage in the summer." "They didn't give me a jacket then," the boy said cheerfully. "Was it that bad in the orphanage? Did they insult you? Everyone cares about you. Now you'd stay warm and go to school," Emily wondered. "It's bad. I don't want to live there. I don't go to school, I can't go. I already know a lot, and I can count as much as I want." Yes, the boy's memory was not bad, but in legal matters, what could he understand even now, even 2 years ago? Emily sighed heavily. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this. Do you remember your address?" "Eric, I would go there. Ask something. How?" "Oh, there's no point," Archie replied. "The new owners must have the apartment. That's all it is, black realtors. I should know better than to know I'd been ripped off by one of those guys. Maggie, too. I don't know why Wolin never told me anything about her and her son. Only Maggie herself can tell me that the old man pondered. You'll get my mom out of jail. It's really not her fault." Honestly, tears welled up in Eric's eyes. "We understand." Baby Emily stroked his head. "I'm going to go look at the apartment, see if I can find out anything from the neighbors." "I think we should go to other people," Archie said firmly. "Ellen, this is the woman who gave birth. She said she was grateful that her husband would always help her. I don't like to ask for gratitude, and I don't like to demand gratitude for services rendered, but this is a special case." "Do you think there's anything he can do to help?" Emily asked. "I have no idea. But we don't even know what kind of person he is, where he works. Maybe just a rich businessman. But we don't need the money. Well, maybe he's influential in some areas. Can he at least help us find out how Maggie got locked up and what happened to the apartment? Or at least tell us who to go to? Is there anything we can do on our own? What are we now? We're nobody." "So, do you still have the phone numbers Ellen gave you?" "All right, let's call her, tell her what our problems are." Emily dialed Ellen's number, but the phone was silent. Well, obviously she's still in the hospital with 2 babies. No conversation at all. Only in the evening did she manage to contact her casual acquaintance, on whom she had pinned so much hope, only to be completely disappointed. "It's okay," Ellen said in a sad, downcast tone. "The kids are fine. So am I, but I'm thinking of divorcing my husband." "Why? Why all of a sudden? I thought things were going well between you two." "Oh, it wasn't fine. Is it good when a husband sends his pregnant wife on a train? I've been thinking about it here at the hospital. Why did he do that? Didn't he realize that I might die? That the children might not survive? Lucky you and Archie were there. What if I hadn't? Is that what you think now? Is he sitting next to me, begging for forgiveness or something? No, he hasn't even been here once. He's got things to do, you see. So I told him, mind your own business and I'll mind my own." And she cried. But why so wide open? Emily tried to reason with her. There must be an explanation for everything. He has a million explanations, but it doesn't make me feel any better. And anyway, we had a fight. I told him I was going to name the kids after you, and he didn't want to do it. He said he wanted to name them after our fathers, Igor and Victor. And he said it was wrong to name a boy after a girl. She's probably right about that. Archie has a grandson named Eric after him. Maybe they'll name a granddaughter after me. I can't fight with my husband over something like that.
Yes, you laugh. But Ellen was very serious and was not going to make up with her husband.
so it was even awkward to address her with her requests in such a case. Well then, that hope is gone, Emily realized. Since this husband was no longer in Ellen's life, he was hardly going to help us. And why should he? It's not like it's just some sum of money. The next day, seeing no other way out, she went to the address that Erich had given her, to his former apartment. Emily didn't know what she wanted to find there. Emily just wanted to look into the eyes of the people who had taken away the only place to live from a single mother and her son, and who were probably responsible for her imprisonment. She hoped to learn at least some details that might help with Maggie's release. After all, if she had to ask for help from powerful people, it was better to know the ins and outs of the case. Should I talk to the neighbors or something? She thought. But what she found out was completely unexpected. The door to the apartment was opened at her call by none other than Greg, her ex-husband. "Emily? Is this where you found me?" he said with a mocking smile. "What do you want from me now? Is the alimony too low again? Or what? What are you doing in this apartment? How did you get in here?" "I got here the right way. I walked in the door, and now this is my apartment. I sold my grandmother's house. You know, I don't want to be in the garden. Now I'm a city dweller. What do you want from me? I need to know how you got this apartment. You took the house from me and my son, and now another woman has it, and you put her in jail. How did you do it? Why do you want to know?" As an exchange of experience, tired of serving tea and coffee to passengers and dirty laundry for the third time to sell people, her ex-husband continued to mock her. This and the other woman should not flap their ears. Think about themselves and their child. Now let her sit, think. And a little such is not harmful. I may be tired of being a conductor, but I've never framed other people, and I never will. And I didn't set you up. But it wouldn't hurt to bring her out in the open. Remember that. Emily turned around and left, not really knowing how she could fulfill her threat. Of course, you could report it to the police, but while they're sorting it out. With such sad news, Emily went home, thinking about what to do next, and on whom she would leave the blind grandfather and his little grandson, while she herself will be on a voyage. If she asked for a nanny, she'd ask for twice as much money, which she didn't have. And if she called Trixie's sister, she'd probably refuse to do her own thing, too. There was still hope that Archie would think of something. After all, he hadn't always just been a blind invalid. He'd worked in a clinic once, probably saved someone's life. He must have had some acquaintances who may have heard some bad things about him, but they'd still remember him as someone who'd helped. But she had no time to tell the news at home. As soon as Emily entered the room, there was a phone call from Ellen this time. She was much more cheerful. "Emily, hello. Excuse me, please. You called last time, probably to say something, and I started complaining to you instead. But you're not angry, are you?" "Of course I'm not angry, Eleonarka, but I understand your problems have been solved. You and your husband are reconciled," Emily rejoiced. "We have." He explained everything to me. Turns out he was building a house, and he decided to finish it completely so that I and the children could move there from the maternity hospital. So now we're in a new house. You could call it a palace. Vincent's with me right now. He'll talk to you. He wants to thank you and Archie too. He's with you. Yeah, our doctor's here. There's a man on the phone. Hello. Emily, this is Vincent Timofeyevich. Can I call you Vincent? I'm the husband. Ellen told me everything. I can't tell you how grateful I am. The doctors at the hospital said it went exceptionally well. Even they couldn't have done better. You have really good hands, and that Archie too.
Oh no. We couldn't leave a woman without help, but all the credit goes to him. He's the doctor. I'm just an assistant. He told me what to do, and I listened to him, Emily explained.
And you did a wonderful job helping my babies come into the world. Thank you so much. I'd really like to meet you both and see if there's anything you need. You know, you can't let something like that go unappreciated. I was just calling. I'm sorry. But that's exactly why Emily said, struggling to find the words. You see, we need help, not money, not material help. I'd like to ask if there are any good lawyers among your acquaintances. Maybe lawyers or, I don't know, someone else. Because Archie and his grandson are in serious trouble. Of course, I'll find you any kind of professional help you need, free of charge. I don't worry about that, Ellen's husband assured her seriously. But it is necessary to meet to find out more about what is bothering you. Emily gave her address and told him when she could be at home. And Archie's staying with me now, too. So we're all here. Oh, and my wife told me she wanted to name the kids after you. And don't even think about it. What's the big deal? Don't worry about it. I think Ellen's changed her mind, too. Vincent arrived the same evening with a lawyer. He listened to the whole story of both the boy and Archie. Apparently, the boy's mother was victimized by the same con artist we've been looking for. Now we'll have something to go on. Don't worry, they'll be held accountable for what they've done. I just wish we could figure out why Maggie went to juvie. I don't think she really did anything wrong. We'll figure that out, too. Once we've started, we've got to keep going. Don't worry. It's a complicated case, but we'll solve it, because there are plenty of victims out there. You're saying your ex-husband was involved? The lawyer was asking around. He was. He also took away the house from me and my son, which our grandmother bequeathed to us. It was obviously illegal, but I couldn't prove anything. I don't know enough, and I don't have any connections. And he brought in some man, apparently with an education. So my son and I were left without a roof over our heads. By the way, my son needs to go to school and to the clinic. Do not worry. Everything will be done according to the law, said the lawyer. And the case began. An additional investigation was launched into why a woman with a young child had her apartment taken away and why she had been convicted. And this time the law was on the side of the deceived. Emily's ex-husband was on trial. Of course, the house could not be returned. It has long been sold. But she was able to get the money for it. But Erich and his mom got their apartment back. And Maggie herself was also released from prison. After a review of the case, it turned out that her accusation was completely false. And soon the happy mother was already hugging her son and thanking Emily and her father-in-law. How could it be, Maggie, Archie asked. And why didn't I know anything about you or Erich? Volan and I had a fight. It was a silly excuse, of course, but it couldn't be helped. It was a big fight. So we broke up. It was my fault, too. I loved him, but I couldn't help myself. I was so worried about it. And then I found out that Volan had died. But even then, it was too late to contact you. Besides, I was embarrassed. You were a serious man then, a rich owner of a clinic. I had no education, no profession. I thought I'd come to you after Volan's death and you'd just kick me out. You'd think I was some kind of fraud, but I'm not. The son is really his. I almost left Erich an orphan because of some stupidity. Archie said reproachfully. What's wrong with your arm? He gently felt his sister-in-law's elbow. Yes, I worked at a sawmill in prison. I made a big mess of it. At first I thought it was nothing and there was no one to treat it, but when I turned to them, they said it would be fine. Anyway, my arm doesn't hurt much. It just can't bend all the way, she said. Probably surgery can be done and everything will not be so difficult, said the former doctor. I don't really care about my arm or anything else. The main thing is that I'm home, that Erich is with me, and we have a place to live. Maybe you'll move in with us. Please, Archie. You're the closest thing we have to family now. Oh, this is awkward. There's not much choice, though, Grandpa said. There's nowhere to live. All I have left after my wife's shenanigans is a room in a communal apartment. It's almost impossible to live there. The neighbors won't let me. And isn't your lawyer, who solved my case so cleverly, will not help? How can you be so traumatized and left with nothing? I don't know, Maggie. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. That's the last thing on my mind today. I'm happy. I've got my grandson, I've got you. And if you can find a corner in your apartment, that'd be great. And I won't be redundant. That's for sure. I think I'll find a job, and you'll be very useful to us. Look after my grandson. Look, Archie grinned. Oh, I'm sorry, it's just a habit. At least you'll be around. It's like a child without supervision. Well, Maggie was embarrassed. Erich and I are real friends now, Archie reassured her.
And with us, too, with me and Gianni, Emily reminded him.
We're not blood relatives, but we're not strangers to each other. And you, Maggie, if you're looking for a job, why don't you come to us as a conductor? We need people all the time. It's not the easiest job in the world, but it's good money. I'd love to. You know, I've been in this damn prison so much. It'd do me good to travel now. That's good, of course. But I tell you, Emily, you'd make a great medic, said Archie. Oh, I wouldn't be a medic. Not unless you're always there to tell me what to do. But in general, I listen to you. I read books on first aid. I don't have time to learn much, but in case of emergency, I won't sit idly by when someone helps me with something. I can do a lot of things myself. Things happen on the road. But before Maggie could get a job, she had to sort out her hand. She was referred for surgery. But it was more complicated than first thought. She stayed in the hospital a little longer than she expected. Emily visited her, and one day, to her amazement, saw on the nightstand a picture of her father next to a woman and a little girl on his lap. Who are those people? She asked. Where did you get that picture? How could I? It's me as a little girl. Didn't you recognize me? Those are my parents, Maggie replied. They're dead now, but I always carry the picture with me. That can't be. That's my father, Emily exclaimed. And when you were born, it turned out there wasn't that much difference in their ages. Maggie had always lived in this town. Emily grew up in the country. I have an older sister, Trixie, also his daughter. I don't see how it could be that he's yours and ours, Emily wondered. It's very simple, I think, said Maggie. He worked on the railroad and traveled all the time. He must have been staying at your place or ours for 2 families. It happens. Yeah, I'll say. That's our daddy, and I never knew it. My mom must have known. I've heard them fight about it. Sometimes Emily remembered. Well, you see, mine used to resent him for coming so seldom, and for being away so long. I wonder, Maggie wondered. So suddenly it turned out that they really are sisters by father. Maggie met Trixie, her husband and 2 children, so it was quite a family. Meanwhile, the fate of Archie and Erich was decided. They were able to prove their kinship, and the grandfather settled Lucy at his failed daughter-in-law. Nor was the acquaintance of Helen and Vincent and their sons Vidi and Gorko, with whose help they came into the world, interrupted. It was interesting to watch the little ones grow up. The mutual appreciation of the adults made it hard to forget each other. Maggie recovered, got a job as a conductor, and they began to travel together with Emily. They became real sisters, and when they finished their business, often told each other about their fates. They both had much to share. They also had something to complain to their family. Maggie had never had any sisters, and Emily and Trixie didn't see each other as often as they would have liked in their spare time. Emily had finished her home nursing course, after all, and was now considered prepared for the unexpected that could happen on the road. On one of the flights, a company of businessmen became passengers. Emily didn't like it right away. Always with this public, some kind of trouble happens. They complain about something without any reason, or demand something. I guess they compare the train to their own office. But what can you do? You can't just drop them off. This time it was not without difficulties. At first, the businessmen behaved quite calmly, young and decent people. It is obvious that they are well-to-do and not in need of anything. They refused tea and closed themselves in their compartment, solving some questions. Suddenly, one of them burst into the compartment of the conductor. Girl, I need a doctor urgently. Do you have any doctors on the train? There's a man in there feeling bad, suffocating. I don't know. We'll have to make an announcement. What's wrong? Emily asked. Who cares what? You're not a doctor, are you? The passenger became indignant. I'm not a doctor, but I can administer first aid. She firmly pushed the petitioner away. Taking the first aid kit, she hurried to his compartment. They'll call a doctor right away. Don't worry. I don't know what's wrong with him. He drank some medicine, suddenly entering the compartment. Emily noticed the serious swelling on the young man's face and quickly realized everything. An anaphylactic shock. An allergy, apparently. What's the drug? Where did he get it? She asked, preparing a syringe.
Wherever he needed it, where he got it, the doctor found it. What are you going to inject him with? I'm telling you to call an ambulance, scandalized the victim's companion.
Please calm down. My partner has already called everyone, and I know what to do. Emily quickly administered an injection and gave the injured man the necessary first aid. The passenger was rescued and regained consciousness rather quickly. Thank you, Savior, he said as he shook Emily's hand. That's a little something like that. I'll pay you for it, and I'll pay you back too. Chuck, you're the one who slipped me this, he turned to his partner.
What did I slip you? You took something yourself. I don't know if you can or can't. You like to blame others.
Yeah, the story was almost criminal. His partner, a competitor of the businessman, gave him headache medicine that he couldn't take. What did he know? Well, he also knew that an allergic reaction can kill you, and that might well have happened if Emily hadn't been there. Thank you. You just saved me. The injured man shook her hand. So are you a doctor too, or what? No, I'm a conductor, but I graduated from nursing school, so I know roughly what happened to you. It's no big deal, really. It's really good that I happened to be around, Emily said, putting the medication away. You just see your doctor. He'll help you out. I don't think you'll need anything else, though. I know, it's happened to me before. Allergies are a scary thing, really, and the one who triggered it, Chuck, you might say is a companion, but really a competitor. Apparently that's how he wants to eliminate me. Can you give a reference as to what caused all this to happen? The man asked.
How can I give it if I'm not a doctor? Emily replied. I can testify, of course. Are you going to sue him, though?
I don't know yet. I actually want to break up with him. I mean, kick him out before some more serious trouble happens, although it wouldn't hurt to punish him for that sort of thing. It's a hell of a way to go. I don't want to get involved, of course, but it wouldn't hurt to tell everyone. Found out when you were finishing work and thought I'd meet you and thank you. You don't have to. Thank you for the beautiful flowers, though. It's been a while since anyone's given them. Emily brightened. You're not married. No, divorced, and I have a child. He's 6, admitted Emily, who had no intention of hiding anything. You must be very tired. Hurry home to your son. I won't keep you, but I'll walk you home, and let's meet tomorrow. I'll invite you to a restaurant or anywhere else you want to go. It was obvious that he was a little shy, but he spoke sincerely. You know, I'd really like to go out. I don't really care where, as long as it's just for a walk. Maybe just down the street, Emily suddenly blurted out, determined not to be modest this time. It was not, of course, a confession of affection, but still, maybe he would realize that he had not left her indifferent. Hercule seemed to guess it, for he was glad of it. He accompanied Emily home, and they made arrangements for tomorrow's meeting, and she was welcomed home by a happy, bored Kieran, who had his own plans for tomorrow with his mom. I so wish you weren't going anywhere already, said the son. Why don't you get some other job so you can leave in the morning and always come in the evening, like all moms do? I'm bored without you. I'll try, buddy. Emily kissed him, who also wanted to find another place. It was so hard for her to leave her son alone for long periods of time. I'll definitely think about it. Will you let me go tomorrow night? I have a little business there. I'd really like to get away for a while. Again, the son was upset. But it's not enough that you're gone all day long. You're going to leave in the evening. I could hardly wait. I have so much to tell you. Why don't you take me with you? Emily was upset too. She realized she was depriving her child of her own company, and that was a bad thing. But what could she do? She wanted to see Hercule. In the evening, she called Maggie and told her about the date for tomorrow. Her sister was delighted. There, I told you you'd be together. Vincent, it's fate. It's their destiny. But I guess I'll have to call him now and turn him down. Kieran misses me so much. He wants to be with me. I can't abandon the baby for my love life. It's not right. Don't you agree? Did you tell your beau that you have a son? Then you could have arranged it so that you all go to some playground together or something else. The child would feel good, and so would you. Oh, I don't know if Hercule would agree. He wants to meet me and I want to meet the baby. That's not right either. Emily hesitated. You know, if his intentions are serious, it won't scare him. And if he just wants to have fun, why would you want to do that? Well, or invite him over to your house. Then spend time all together, and he'll see how you live, what kind of hostess you are. You know, you're probably right. I'm going to call him and tell him I can't leave my son, Emily said firmly. And so she did. She called, apologized, and explained that she and her son missed each other too much and couldn't bear to part ways. Maybe some other time, she suggested gently, afraid that Hercule would hang up now. But he took it with complete understanding. Yes, of course. Somehow I hadn't thought of that. Would you like to keep me company? The three of us could go out. I think there's a nice kids' cafe in the neighborhood. Emily was ready to dance with joy. She had never expected to find such an understanding and kind man who was willing to spend time not only with her, but also with her child. Of course we'd love to, she said. That day of the first date went just fine. All three were happy and had no doubt that their meeting would not be their last. Hercule seemed to be quite serious. He himself had brought up the idea that it would be a good idea for Emily to learn another profession so that she wouldn't have to go far and long. I don't know yet. I'm really not good at anything else after all, and I'm not educated. I've only got courses in conductors and nursing, and with courses they won't take me very far, she explained. Why not? You've got to find out first. Maybe it's all quite real. To work as a nurse, let's say, just in the treatment room. You do bandages, right? You give shots too. He saved me, Hercule was saying. But maybe, if only, so she answered doubtfully. All relatives and acquaintances supported her. Maggie, who had grown tired of the romance of long-distance travel rather quickly, was also not against it. Honestly, it's not for us. This job is not for moms. We'll be constantly on the road. We won't notice how our sons will grow up. And it's good if they grow up right, in the sense of good people. You know what happens to kids who are left unsupervised. Erichma communicates with street children and says that it is not the best company, and many become such not because the parents died or for some other serious reasons. A lot of them have a mom and a dad. They just don't have time for kids, so they just hang around doing nothing. I'm thinking of going to school too, but of course not to study medicine, but something else. Maybe an accountant, Maggie reasoned. Emily and Hercule's relationship was developing. The young man had already become his own not only in her house, but also got acquainted with all her family. He was already perceived by everyone as a fiancé. Relations with Jennifer, he had a great relationship, and the matter was steadily moving towards the wedding. On the engagement of the whole family was invited to the restaurant. In front of everyone, Hercule handed her favorite bouquet, put on her finger ring, and asked to become his wife. The consent. America is all about the kitchen. Dawn and dusk spread a cozy light on the girl. She couldn't sleep. Very soon the truck would arrive to take things away from the apartment Jennifer had been renting for almost 8 years now. She'd come here as a young, inexperienced girl, just out of high school, just started university. Jennifer felt like a kid back then. Perhaps it was because her mother was still alive. Now Jennifer was a completely different person, an adult, knowing life, burdened with the baggage of experience. And she was even a little envious of her young, enthusiastic self. Then it seemed to her that only the best, brightest, most interesting things were ahead. At first it was so. Life in the city turned around. The girl spun a motley round dance of studies, new acquaintances, previously unexplored entertainment. It was fun. And then troubles fell on Jennifer's head one after another. She had to grow up quickly, take off the rose-colored glasses, struggle. Jennifer was born and raised in the town of Cedarville, located about 160 kilometers from the big city of Phoenix. Her childhood was just wonderful. Loving parents, numerous friends, faithful dog buddy, a mix of sheepdog and mongrel. What else does a child need for happiness? In the summer, Jennifer and her friends rode bicycles to the river and walked in the woods. In winter, the same company had fun riding down the mountains on sleds, or just cardboard and building huge snow forts. Jennifer always studied well. Studying was easy for her, and Mom was always there for her. If anything is unclear, will prompt, help, explain. Dad was often absent at work. He worked as a driver on the local farm. He took produce to the city, or, on the contrary, delivered something from the city to the owner. Jennifer's father grabbed any part-time job to bring home more money because his wife, after the birth of his daughter, left work to deal with the child. So the breadwinner of the family was one. Jennifer was indeed a long-awaited daughter. Her parents hadn't had a baby for years. What only they did not do, and the holy places traveled, and healing springs visited, and to a variety of herbalists went. This is, of course, after the official medicine gave the future mother Jennifer sentence infertility. Doctors did not leave a woman no chance that she will be able to get pregnant. They advised to resign or take a child from an orphanage. Only then the couple decided to go the unconventional way: witch doctors, monasteries, healers. In the end, the miracle still happened. True, at the time of the birth of their daughter, Jennifer's parents were already over 40. Their peers were waiting for grandchildren, and they just had a baby. Needless to say, the mother and father did not want to admire their little girl, could not admire her. Everything she did delighted and amazed them. Jennifer grew up with a sense of reliable rear behind her back, in an atmosphere of love and acceptance. When the girl became older, of course, she noticed that her friends' parents are young, beautiful, strong. Her parents are almost like grandparents. But Jennifer had never been stressed by this fact. On the contrary, she sympathized with her peers when she saw how their fathers and mothers treated them. Adults often yelled at the children, got annoyed, sometimes even hit, and called them names. Nothing like that ever happened in Jennifer's family. Her mother and father always respected their daughter's wishes and were very attentive to her. They asked how her day was, discussed Jennifer's problems together. The girl clearly knew home is a place where she will always understand, always support. This feeling was worth a lot. Her mother and father were happy that their girl was doing well in her studies. They set her up for further study at the university. They often talked to their daughter about the importance of higher education. "Go, my daughter," on the lawyer, reasoned the mother. "You will always have a piece of bread, and the work is important, respected. In a warm office we'll sit in. No way. I from early morning to the farm to stomp, then with frozen manure hands to deal with. Women's beauty, daughter. Physical work fades quickly. Listen to your mother, she's right," echoed her father. "Your head is well cooked, you will cope with everything." And this unconditional faith of her parents in the successful future of their daughter supported the girl, gave her strength, faith, and it began to seem that she, herself, of course, everything will work out. Often father and mother put their daughter as an example of the neighbor's son, Tom. He was a couple years older than Jennifer. A short, sturdy boy. Not handsome, like Betty, for instance, but very nice, very pleasant. Dark brown skin, dark brown intelligent eyes, thick brown hair. He looks very Italian, and just as smiling, friendly. Of course, Jennifer made up all her ideas about Italians from popular movies, and Tom looked just like their heroes. Tom was always different from the village kids. Instead of playing soccer with the boys, he spent his days and nights reading books from the local library. If it had been comic books, or even adventure novels, Jennifer would have understood. But the books Tom chose were strange anatomy guides and treatises on the structure of the human body. Sometimes Jennifer couldn't even read the titles of these books correctly, let alone understand them. Tom was the best student in school. He was especially distinguished in natural sciences, chemistry, biology. The boy often went to the city to the regional Olympiads in these subjects and never returned without a prize. No one was surprised when Tom entered the academy after finishing school, but not to the local nearest university, located in Agapov, but to the capital's university. Tom's parents were happy to share their son's success with the neighbors. As a student, he had already assisted a distinguished surgeon and written some important and complex work. In general, appreciated their Pine Tom metropolitan luminaries. Jennifer was both happy for her neighbor and a little sad. Tom, he flew up so high you can't reach him. Jennifer liked that guy. Except she never admitted it to him. First of all, she was too young for him. Secondly, that's the last thing you want to do. Hang yourself on a guy's neck. Jennifer's not like that. What was Jennifer's attraction to the boy next door? Well, for one thing, his kind and intelligent eyes. And then there was his calm demeanor, his inner strength and confidence. Tom seemed to know exactly what to do in any given situation. Tom was very different from the rest of the boys. It's just a pity that he didn't pay any attention to girls at all. He was always busy just studying. But sometimes he and Jennifer would talk. They lived near each other, so they'd come home from school together. They'd meet each other on the way home from the store, too, and they'd talk neighborly. They discussed, it seemed, everything in the world, the weather, what was happening in the village, cases and guys they knew. Sometimes they talked about world problems, mysticism and miracles. Jennifer had never had such interesting conversations with anyone. The girl would not mind to stop at the gate, to chat with Tom even a little more, but he always hurried home to his books and computer. Jennifer had never met such enthusiastic people before. These conversations were another reason why Jennifer was in love with her neighbor. Too bad he didn't need anything but his books in his life. It wasn't just Jennifer who liked Tom. There was something about him that attracted other girls to him, and they acted much more daring and uninhibited than the modest Jennifer. But all their attempts to attract Tom's attention were to no avail, and Jennifer quietly rejoiced at her rivals' failures and enjoyed their disappointment. Some girls, offended by Tom's neglect, spread rumors about him in the village, but no one believed them. Then Tom entered the university in the capital, left Sosnovka. He started a whole new life, and Jennifer realized she'd never see him again. The end of their friendship and interesting conversations. It made her very sad. But what could be done? Tom was held up as an example to all the Sosnovsky children, not just Jennifer. His name had become almost a household name. Study like Tom, then you'll get somewhere in life. Perhaps Tom, caught up in the whirlwind of his new life, never thought of his neighbors, but they often talked about him. The years flew by, and now Jennifer was a senior. The joyful event receiving a red certificate was overshadowed by the fact that the girl's father the day before went to the hospital with a heart attack. During the solemn line, at which the teachers spoke very warm and good words about Jennifer, he was in intensive care between life and death. Of course, Jennifer and her mother sat in the school auditorium as if on pins and needles. It was no time for celebration for both of them when a dear, beloved person was in such a state. Yes, this was not how Jennifer had envisioned this day. She had worked so hard, studied so hard to make her parents proud of her during the graduation. For the first time, the girl regretted that her mother and father were already so old. She used to be happy about it. Her adult parents were much more tolerant of her than her younger ones. But the situation with her father showed that elderly relatives are no longer distinguished by good health. Something could happen to them at any moment. My father spent all of June and half of July in a coma. He never learned that his daughter had enrolled in law school at State University. Then, at the height of the summer, Jennifer's father passed away in the hospital walls, never regaining consciousness. It was a huge blow for both the girl and her mother. But they were together, supported each other, consoled. Somehow they coped with grief, especially since they had a lot of things to do, and it distracted from sad thoughts. After the funeral, her mother and Jennifer together went to the city and chose an apartment where the girl was to live during her studies. It was a small studio apartment in an old 5-story building. The most fortunate thing was the location of the dwelling. The university was within walking distance. This meant that Jennifer would not have to spend every morning at the bus stop waiting for the right bus. A 10-minute walk and she was there. Jennifer was excited to be starting a new life. First of all, it's exciting and interesting. Secondly, it was easier to get over the loss of her father. After all, new experiences are distracting. Youth took its toll in the city. Jennifer recovered quickly, felt the joy of life again. She met new people. She even got a young man. Stephen, a student, took Jennifer to cafes and to the waterfront. They walked, holding hands, kissing. Their relationship was light, superficial. The girl understood it perfectly well. Neither Stephen had strong feelings for her, nor she for him, but both of them were satisfied with this state of affairs. It was customary to meet someone, so they met, expecting nothing special from this unburdensome relationship. Jennifer became friends with Jacqueline. She was at the same university, but in a different department. Some of the girls' lectures were held together. Jacqueline somehow forgot her fountain pen. Jennifer had a spare. That's how they met. Jacqueline lived in the city with her parents and suffered from their overprotection. Mother and father, according to the girl's assurances, controlled her every step, pressured the grown-up daughter, demanded complete obedience. And it pissed Jacqueline off, Jennifer said. That's why Jacqueline often stayed overnight at Jennifer's house in spite of her parents. I envy you. You live alone. No one's bothering you, Jacqueline sighed. Jennifer shook her head silently. She didn't argue with Jacqueline. She knew she wouldn't understand. Jennifer herself was desperately jealous of her friend. Her parents didn't seem evil or abnormal. They simply loved their daughter and were not indifferent to her fate. And Jacqueline did not understand her happiness. And it's so great to have both mom and dad around. Both young, healthy, energetic. The bitterness of her father's loss often made itself known, sometimes quite painfully. And my mom was troubling too. She had lost a lot of energy after the loss of her husband. Now mother often had headaches and high blood pressure. She tried not to worry her daughter, but she could see that her mother was not well. They often called each other via video call, and it was impossible to hide the painful appearance. When Jennifer was in her 3rd year of high school, fate dealt her another blow. Mom, Jennifer said. A stroke took her life. It happened right in front of her neighbor Samantha. She quickly called an ambulance, but the doctors were too late. Jennifer refused to accept this horrifying fact. Was she really alone in the world now? Another disadvantage of a late and only child is the lack of siblings. If her parents had had someone else, Jennifer would not have felt such an impossible emptiness inside after losing them. Jennifer was supported by the Clark family's neighbors at the time. They knew both the girl herself and her parents. It was these people who helped to confuse Jennifer organize the funeral and wake. It was they who had suggested how to handle the inheritance. Jennifer was very grateful to them for that. But new acquaintances Stephen and Jacqueline turned out to be such a support. Stephen disappeared, unable to bear the weight of what Jennifer was going through. Because of the tragedy, Jacqueline still tried to distract her friend. But it was so pathetic and unsuccessful words and actions that Jennifer only got worse. Eventually, Jacqueline disappeared from Jennifer's apartment as well. You should probably be alone right now, shouldn't you? Well, you call if you need anything when you come to your senses, Jacqueline said. It was a rough patch. Jennifer had to pick herself back up from the ashes, but she got through it. Getting used to total loneliness was not easy. For a long time, Jennifer was drawn to call her mother to share the news or tell her about some problem. But slowly, Jennifer's life returned to normal. Now, instead of remittances from her mother, she received a survivor's pension. She was already an adult, but she was still a full-time university student. Jennifer was entitled to this benefit. The pension, together with the scholarship, allowed the girl to make ends meet, to pay rent, to eat, to buy the necessary things for her studies, to dress. Jennifer was graduating from the university, and her friend Jacqueline made different plans for the time after graduation. Some dreamed of traveling for a year, others thought of studying further. But Jennifer had only one option to find a job. Immediately after receiving a diploma, payments from the state will cease, which means that Jennifer will have to provide for herself independently. Adulthood and responsibility were frightening. But where to go? You have to live somehow. Of course, Jennifer could not find a job as a lawyer. Who needs a lawyer with no experience? And her age and gender didn't play into Jennifer's hands. You're only 22? The woman in human resources asked. She's young. Now I'll take you, you'll get married, then maternity, then the second. And after that, endless sick days. We know the type. Other recruiters might not have been so frank, but Jennifer could tell from their looks and facial expressions. No one wanted to hire a young girl with no experience. Teach her, then pay her maternity and sick leave. Jennifer tried to convince her employers that she wasn't going to get married, she had no one. And she doesn't want to rush into having children. She realizes that she needs to get on her feet first. But it was all for nothing. As a result, the girl decided to lower the bar of requirements for future work. It is not necessary to work in a specialty. The main thing is to be paid. So Jennifer stood behind the cash register at the supermarket, replenished the army of specialists with diplomas, forced to work in unskilled positions. What to do? Jennifer Agapova did not have it so easy with employment. One could, of course, return to her hometown of Fleming. At least she had her own place to live. Jennifer often thought about her home. Life in Fleming is much more measured, quiet, understandable. Fleming is Fleming. Not like Los Angeles with its frantic rhythm. But where do you work there? What, go to a farm? Jennifer can't do any of that. Hands aren't made for physical labor. And she can't do heavy labor. Jennifer wasn't used to country life. At least in the city, you could always get a job as a cashier. There are so many supermarkets growing everywhere like mushrooms after rain. Jennifer's own life seemed dreary and dull. Indeed, there was little joy in it. Early rise, a trip in a crowded bus to the other side of the city. Then the work was long, exhausting, monotonous. At the same time, it was necessary to be extremely careful, because any shortage was deducted from Jennifer's salary. But the hardest part was dealing with people. Jennifer was supposed to behave impeccably, politely, even with the most dissatisfied customers. So the girl had to endure rudeness and outright insults, accusations of distrust, slowness and other sins. Cashier. How do you put up with it? Jacqueline was indignant. If I were you, I would have left a long time ago. They were friends again, because Jacqueline was still fighting with her parents, and she needed a place to sleep after she proudly slammed the door. Jacqueline herself worked as an accountant at the firm her father had set her up with. His connections helped, because inexperienced accountants from the street, just like inexperienced lawyers, were not very popular. Jacqueline told Jennifer how hard the job was for her. You have to learn everything. You have to run on the parcels of the senior, listen to the comments from the bosses. Of course, Jacqueline had loving and caring parents, so she could not understand Jennifer. Jacqueline lived in her own pleasure, but her friend had to survive. Jennifer wished she had a strong male shoulder to lean on, a man with whom to share all the hardships of this lonely adult life. Reliable, wise, faithful. But where would one find such a man? Jennifer looked around carefully, but saw no one suitable. At work, she tried to court the loader Michael, a young, handsome guy who worked part-time at the mall after graduating from university. But Michael, he is not serious, and on such a one cannot rely. He has only partying on his mind and entertainment. The boy had time not only to court Jennifer, but also to pay attention to other girls. No, that's not what Jennifer wanted. Jacqueline, she really got serious. She met a young man at work. I think he was the head of some department. They were dating. This Phil took Jacqueline on dates to restaurants, complimented her, gave her expensive gifts. And then he proposed. Jennifer was genuinely happy for her friend. Only on her background even more acutely felt their own loneliness and worthlessness. Jennifer attended the wedding of Jacqueline and Phil. The groom's friends were looking at the pretty bridesmaid with interest, but they were all with their other halves, and Jennifer, as always, alone. One of these guests, Phil's buddies, Henry the First Think, looked tipsy. He trailed Jennifer down a narrow hallway, grabbed her with his strong hands, pulled her against him, and whispered in her ear, fuming the frightened girl with fumes of booze, obscene suggestions, literally begging her to become his mistress. Promised golden mountains, full content, only to keep everything secret. Jennifer forcefully pushed the rude man away from her. The mood was irrevocably ruined. Jennifer tried to get acquainted with men on the internet. She wrote at once that she was interested only in serious, long-term relationships with the prospect of creating a family. This probably cut off some of the frivolous candidates, but obviously not all of them. Jennifer had a string of unsuccessful dates. She could probably write an interesting book about them, or at least a big article. "Maybe you're not acting that way," Jacqueline said thoughtfully, listening to her friend. "There's no such thing as everyone turning out to be such assholes. It just doesn't happen." Her friend's words hurt Jennifer's heart. She wanted something else: support, understanding. And Jacqueline actually said that Jennifer was to blame for everything, that it was something wrong with her, not with men. Maybe that was true. Jacqueline would know. Jacqueline had everything worked out perfectly, both in her profession and in her marriage. She and her husband moved into their own apartment with a mortgage. Now she was expecting a baby. Jennifer was happy for her friend, who one by one made her dreams come true. And she hoped, desperately hoping, that she would one day be as lucky. For now, her life was chaos, loneliness, moneylessness, uninteresting, monotonous work. Then Jacqueline had a baby, and the friends began to see each other much more often. The young mother was tired, unable to cope with the baby. The husband, according to Jacqueline, she did not help her at all, she complained. "And on my parents I am very offended. They themselves asked for grandchildren, and father and mother-in-law promised to help. But as soon as I gave birth, that's it. There is no one. Alone with a baby. I struggle like a fish against the ice, malnourished and sleep-deprived. And he's cranky. I can't take it anymore." At first, Jennifer came to help her friend with the baby once a week. The girl quickly learned to manage the baby. It turned out that nothing was so difficult. Jacqueline enjoyed her visits. She boiled the kettle, put treats on the table, and put the newborn in her friend's care. She'd go for a bath. Then Jacqueline started calling more and more. She had to go to the dentist or to the stores, and as always, there was no one to leave the baby with. So Jennifer put aside her own business and drove to her friend's house. She was tired to work, household chores, but she didn't want to refuse Jacqueline. The girl understood that her friend would definitely take offense. After all, Jacqueline was the only close person for Jennifer. She didn't want to lose her, too. And in general, friends should really help each other. That's called friendship, right? In the presence of Jacqueline's husband, Phil, Jennifer felt uncomfortable every time. It seemed that he was unhappy with his wife and the fact that her friend was in their apartment so often. Sometimes young people quarreled right in front of Jennifer, and then the girl did not know where to go from shame. Phil and Jacqueline accused each other of the same thing: laziness, lack of support and help. Yeah. After all, before the baby was born, their family had seemed perfect to Jennifer. Maybe it was just an appearance, and then suddenly, out of the blue, another inventory of the supermarket's cash register revealed a huge shortfall. It looked like Jennifer was the culprit. The girl, hearing the amount of her debt, stunned. She even felt a little sick to her stomach. She didn't have that kind of money. She'd have to work for 6 months for free to pay it all off, without eating, drinking, or paying rent. So how come? Jennifer tried to justify herself to her boss. "This is a mistake. It couldn't have happened to me. I count everything carefully. I mean, I've worked for you guys for so long. This has never happened before." The boss looked at Jennifer accusingly, distant. She was usually much more friendly to her, as if she were a long-time, trusted employee. "What do we do now?" Jennifer asked. What? Pay off the shortfall. Otherwise, you're looking at a criminal case for embezzlement or theft. I don't know exactly how they classify that nowadays. Either way, you'd be in a lot of trouble. But I don't even have that kind of money, the girl objected. Maybe I'll pay it back somehow? I'll give you half of my salary. We'll pay it off gradually. The boss shook her head negatively. The money should be in the cashier's office in the near future. We can't do it in installments. But where will I get it? I don't know. Borrow it from someone or take out a loan. Jennifer thought about it. A loan? The interest rates are insane. It would take the lion's share of your paycheck. Borrow? She probably couldn't borrow. Just at that moment, the phone rang demandingly in her jeans pocket. Jacqueline's number popped up on the screen. I see. She had to babysit again. And then it hit Jennifer, of course, it's Jacqueline. A friend of hers had boasted more than once that when she went on maternity leave, as a conscious and intelligent woman, she had managed to build up a financial cushion just in case. I'm sure she'll help me out of trouble. We're so close. Especially lately. And Jennifer. Of course, she'd try to pay her friend back as soon as possible. Only the interest wouldn't have to be overpaid. How much she takes, she'll pay back. It's a way out. Lucky you. Jacqueline's tired voice echoed through the phone. The background was the demanding cry of a baby. But I need to go away for a couple of hours in the evening. You come after work and sit, and I'll be there. Thank you. You're the best friend ever. Jennifer had no doubt that Jacqueline would help her out. After all, they were almost like sisters. Jennifer herself helped her a lot and let her stay overnight when Jacqueline quarreled with her parents and proudly left the house, and babysat the baby as much as she could. Jennifer took it for granted that her friend would help her in a difficult situation, especially since she had the opportunity to do so. But when she heard the request, Jacqueline somehow immediately tensed up, her lips tightened, and she froze in her chair. That's the way it is, Jennifer summarized the story of the shortfall. I'm in such a difficult situation. There's no one to help me. You're my only hope. Jennifer was very uncomfortable to address her friend with such a request, but what else could she do? You see, Jennifer, there's no way I can help you out. I'm sorry, Jacqueline said. Why not? The question came out of Jennifer's mouth before she had a chance to think about it. Of course, she felt she had no right to ask her friend such a question. Why? Jacqueline began to get annoyed. First of all, we have a mortgage with Phil. You know, his job isn't always stable. So these savings of mine are being spent slowly. And then there's the baby, the diapers, the formula. You don't know how expensive all that stuff is. I understand. Jennifer nodded. Her last hope for a favorable resolution to the situation melted away. Jacqueline is unable to help her. That's too bad. So you can't babysit after this rejection? Jacqueline asked quietly, her eyes downcast. No way. Jennifer shook her hands. How could you even think such a thing? Of course I'll babysit. We're friends. Jennifer had to take out a loan. Her already modest life became even more austere. The girl took part-time jobs, spent days and nights at work. In her spare time, Jacqueline was also babysitting. Meanwhile, Jacqueline got a new car. The old car was worn out, and now Jacqueline was driving around in a foreign car from the showroom, new, glossy, beautiful, like a toy. Her friend described the merits of her new car without end. Jennifer listened, nodded, smiled, and tried not to think about how Jacqueline had assured her a few weeks ago that almost all her savings had melted away, that she and Phil were in need themselves. So Jacqueline could have lent her friend money, but she didn't. Well, Jennifer understood perfectly well that Jacqueline should not have given up her dream of a new car for her. It was such a personal matter. Jacqueline could do with her money as she pleased. She didn't owe Jennifer anything. There's nothing to be offended about. Jennifer wasn't offended. She still went to her friend's house in her spare time to help her with the baby. That way the girl felt like she wasn't alone. She seemed to have people close to her. Otherwise, it was completely dark. Summer, and the most beautiful season of the year, the golden fall, flew by quickly. The cold came. It was only then that Jennifer came to her senses. It turns out that she has nothing to wear. The old jacket has completely fallen into disrepair, and even a stain on it Jennifer planted. Something did not take it. In general, there is an urgent need to update the closet. And with what? Jennifer's entire salary was spent on rent and loan payments. She ate beets, bread, and the cheapest pasta and canned goods. How could she afford to buy new clothes on a budget like that? And yet you have to wear something, right? The solution, Jacqueline said, is to go to the flea market. What? Jennifer didn't understand. Well, there's one near the train station, where the fountain used to be, remember? People gather, sell used stuff. I'm sure you'll find something. Nothing to do. On her day off, Jennifer went to the flea market. I'm just telling fortunes, the girl said suddenly, her black eyes scrutinizing Jennifer. For free. I'm rich. I'm just learning. I need to practice. Jennifer grinned. She couldn't help thinking that she was a young con artist, that she was just trying to get her teeth into her mouth to steal her purse. But then the girl would be in for a big disappointment. There was nothing there to take. I see you don't trust her. The gypsy was a chatty girl. All right, then I'll tell you a little about your past. Then you'll realize that I'm not deceiving you. Well, tell me, Jennifer nodded. Shall I give you a hand? The palm of your hand? Can you read the palm of my hand? You cheer me up, girl, laughed the gypsy. These are all grandmother's fairy tales. What palm? I don't need a palm. I can see everything in your beautiful eyes. Well, I'm listening. Jennifer was relaxed for some reason. The girl was so nice and friendly that she has completely relaxed her interlocutor. I can see that your life is not easy. Loneliness. I see losses in your past. Serious losses, the gypsy woman said. Oh, they were people very close to you. Your parents, I guess, right? The fortune teller looked sympathetically at Jennifer, who nodded affirmatively. Surprisingly, the girl had accurately read her past. But you didn't give up, you didn't break, continued the young gypsy. You are strong. And you won't break. You have no one now. And you're sad. It's hard for you to be alone. Just know that your life is about to change. It's already starting to change. You just don't see it yet, do you? Jennifer looked at the gypsy with hope. Of course she nodded. I can see it in your eyes. Soon you'll have money, lots of money. You'll forget about poverty once, and for all you'll be able to spend as much as you want. Oh, you'll be lucky soon. I wish I were. Jennifer smiled. I like your prediction. I can't wait. It will be soon, the girl replied seriously. I can see that you don't believe it, and you want to believe it, but you can't yet. You'll remember my words. True, it is not money that will bring you happiness. The main thing is something else. Later, a little later. You'll meet your man. He's already looking for you everywhere. He'll find you soon. You'll be happy. Oh, I see children. Shall I tell you how many babies you'll have? No, I'd rather have a surprise. My grandmother used to say you can't tell people the whole truth. No details. Just generalities and innuendos. These prophecies of the novice fortune teller made Jennifer's soul warm, and tears began to gather in her eyes. There was a feeling that this gypsy just read her dreams and voiced them. Maybe it was the young girl's inexperience. She had admitted that she was a novice fortune teller. Maybe she just confused Jennifer's dreams with her future. That's all. No, I'm not wrong. Not that much ever, the gypsy protested. Jennifer even flinched in surprise. Had she read her mind? Goosebumps ran down her spine. When? When will all this happiness suddenly descend on me? Jennifer asked the question. Well, we can't say for sure, the gypsy answered. But we won't have long to wait. You know, I'll give you a hint, though it would be a very rude intervention, said the gypsy. But you will come to everything on your own just after a while. I'll give you a hint right away. Anyway, it's all about that new coat of yours. There's something in it. Take a look. Look for it at home. Pay attention. Wow. Jennifer smiled. What am I supposed to be looking for? You'll find out, the gypsy said evasively. I've told you too much already. You'll be all right. Don't be afraid of anything and believe in good things. All right, thank you, Jennifer nodded. The girl waved goodbye and hurried somewhere behind the bus stop to board. Jennifer watched her until the gypsy girl was out of sight behind the trees. Not that the girl believed the young fortune teller's prediction. No, of course not. And yet, at home, the first thing Jennifer did was to examine the coat, searching through the pockets, both main and hidden, and scrutinizing the collar. Then she guessed, she started probing the lining. And that's when her fingers found a rustling piece of paper. Maybe it's a big bill, Jennifer thought. The gypsy promised me a lot of money. Maybe the old coat was the old owner's stash. I could really use the money now. The girl carefully slipped her fingers into the lining of the coat so that it would be easy to sew it up, and extracted not a large bill, as she had hoped, but a note. A note, written in quick, messy handwriting on a scrap of paper. The thought flashed through her mind that it was an instruction manual for finding treasure. The gypsy woman had promised riches, but the content of the note shocked Jennifer. Please help. Read the girl. Don't think this is a joke or an evil prank. He has kidnapped me. He's keeping me locked up in the basement, making me fix old things that I think he's selling later. I'm in a village. It's not far from town. I don't know the name. But I managed to notice that there is a sign nearby that says 153 kilometers. I don't know what that means, the note continued. His house is somewhere on the edge of the village. It's always quiet here, no one lives nearby. Just behind the house is a forest or a plantation. I don't know what it is, he'll kill me like the others. Help me, please. Jennifer's breath caught. Her hands trembled. There was a pounding in her temples. Whoever had written this person was in danger, and in such fear that she didn't even want to imagine it. What was there to do? Jennifer had no doubt that the note was not a joke, but a real cry for help. And the girl made the only right decision, put on her new coat again, and went to the nearest police station. At first, no one wanted to listen to Jennifer. She was brushed off, sent home. The kids are just kidding around. You wouldn't understand, a pot-bellied policeman with tired, red eyes told her. Their jokes are so stupid. I have a lot of experience. Do you know how many jokers I've seen? But Jennifer stood her ground. The girl knew that the person who left the secret message had only her. Only Jennifer could save him or her from captivity. For we must act quickly. There was no telling how long the note had been in her coat. It is possible that it is already too late to do anything at all, but I did not want to think about it. Finally, one of the young operatives, Henry, agreed to take Jennifer's statement. Henry, you're a fool to take on unnecessary problems, his older colleagues told him. The operative listened to Jennifer, wrote down her statement, took the note from her, and walked the girl to the exit, promising that he would keep her informed. She was a witness in the case, and her presence and testimony would still be needed. The girl kept trying to find out from him on the way out whether he was not deceiving her, whether he was trying to get rid of an annoying visitor. The policeman assured her that everything would be all right and he would take care of it. Well, Jennifer had no choice but to rely on this young man. She had done everything in her power. Now it was up to them, the enforcers of the law. Not 4 days after Jennifer's visit to the station, she received a phone call from the very same operative, Henry, inviting her to a meeting. The girl even had to take a day off from work, although in her position it was quite frivolous to take a vacation at her own expense. Well, the policeman greeted Jennifer with a friendly smile. "Thanks to you, a very high-profile case has been solved. Have you heard about Clark's daughter?" Jennifer nodded. Who hadn't heard of her? Clark was a major figure in their town. Co-owner of the town's steel mill. He was also an MP, rich, famous, powerful. Every now and then there'd be a picture of him, a video of him. And about 3 months ago, a terrible thing happened. His teenage daughter went missing. A 16-year-old girl who'd never been denied anything. She was studying at a prestigious language grammar school, constantly vacationing abroad. The girl was assigned a driver and a guard. How come she disappeared? No one understood. Peyton was Clark's daughter's name, the operative continued. It was as if she vanished into thin air, disappeared in that brief moment when no one was watching her. On the way from the school gate to the car with the guard and driver. There were a lot of theories. Many believed that Clark's rivals had decided to influence him through his daughter. They carefully planned the kidnapping, took the girl away, hid her. Except for one thing. The thing is, no one ever contacted Clark. If his daughter had been kidnapped for ransom or manipulation, the intruders would have long ago voiced their will to the unhappy father, and those were silent. According to another version, Peyton simply ran away from home on her own, away from an influential father, controlling mother, from guards, drivers, and endless circles and sections. The child wanted freedom, a different life. Or maybe love intervened in the case in general. These versions people in social networks people discussed with particular eagerness, because this version of the girl's disappearance seemed the most romantic, reminiscent of a TV series or a movie. Clark searched for his daughter, but in vain. There was no sign of her anywhere. Peyton had vanished into thin air. The desperate father even put up posters around town, and he's been promising ridiculous sums of money for any information on the girl. Of course, Jennifer knew Peyton Clark's story and couldn't help but know it. "So did she asked. "Did Peyton write that note that was in my coat?" Investigator Henry nodded and shone even brighter. "We saved the girl. We did. She's alive and well. She's in the hospital now. She's exhausted and had a nervous breakdown. But that's okay. Daddy's gonna make sure she gets a decent rehab. She'll be as good as new. There's some papers you need to sign. You have an important role in this case. You're a witness. It was your testimony that helped save that girl." Jennifer got chills down her spine. I mean, really, if she hadn't bought that coat and met a gypsy on the way, that's someone worthy of gratitude. If it hadn't been for the young fortune teller's words, there's no telling when Jennifer would have discovered the note under the lining. Or maybe she wouldn't have found it at all. Or maybe she would have washed the coat and the text would have blurred, become unreadable. The young gypsy girl was also directly involved in Peyton's fate. But what is it? Jennifer wondered. Had I encountered something mystical and inexplicable? Is it all true? Is there something in the world that is beyond human comprehension? But the girl decided to think about this thought later. Now she was very interested in the details of Peyton's rescue. What happened to the girl, to Peyton? What happened to her? What happened to her? Why did she disappear? Jennifer asked. There must be such an interesting story there. The investigator pulled a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket and looked at her questioningly, saying if she minded. Jennifer nodded. From the looks of it, it was going to be a long conversation. But she wasn't in any hurry. She had a full day off anyway. The investigator's speech flowed smoothly and measuredly. He was a great storyteller. Young Peyton Clark was accustomed from an early age to having her every wish granted. He began. You want an expensive toy? No problem. A designer dress? No problem. Recording a music video in a real studio was also doable. The only thing the girl lacked was freedom. All her days were scheduled literally by minute studies, extra classes and sections. And Peyton was already a grown-up girl. She wanted love and friendship, freedom. She wanted to know the world better. And behind the fence of the mansion it so beckoned seemed so interesting, full of adventures and bright events. And one day Peyton ran away, slipped away after school from the vigilant guards and driver, waiting for her, as always, at the fence of the elite gymnasium car. Peyton walked, just wandered around the city, sat in cafes, met people, talked to street musicians, and even danced with them in the underpass, feeling incredibly happy and free. It was a wonderful day. Everyone around her seemed so kind, so friendly, and so real. Her father's words about man being a wolf to man seemed to be some kind of heresy. Peyton even decided that she understood more about life than her influential parent. He's so mature and serious, still hasn't figured out what's what. Not like Peyton. And then Peyton met a guy. She thought he was cute and very charming. He was tall, smiling, and a little simple-minded, modest, not at all like the boys Peyton was used to socializing with. They were arrogant and self-loving. But this stranger came up to her, introduced himself as Jaden, and gave her a few sweet and touching compliments. It made young, inexperienced Peyton dizzy. Jaden was carrying a huge backpack on his shoulders. He told the girl that he sold second-hand items at the market in the underpasses for a living. Peyton volunteered to help him. Jaden told an amazing story about himself. I grew up in an orphanage. I didn't know my parents. I had to endure a lot of things as a kid. And then as a teenager, I went through fire, water, and bricks and mortar. Peyton listened to chilling stories of poverty, street fights, and trying to find her parents. By evening, Peyton agreed to ride with Jaden to his house. He said he lived in an apartment in an old building on the outskirts of town. The girl already considered the man a close friend. Jaden skillfully put the new acquaintance at ease. Peyton sat down in his car, an old Lada that had outlived its useful life. Jaden offered her a sip of water. She gladly accepted. They had recently eaten shawarma from a stall, and now Peyton was thirsty. As soon as she took a few sips, everything around her began to spin at breakneck speed. Peyton clutched at Jaden's sleeve to keep from falling. She felt violently nauseous. Then darkness. Memories came back in snatches. Peyton opens her eyes and sees the car turn off on a country road at a pole marked mile marker 153. Jaden pulls her, powerless, immobilized, out of the cabin, hoists her onto his shoulder, and carries her into the house. Peyton notices that the house is on the edge of a long village street. Just beyond the fence begins either a forest or a plantation. Peyton finally woke up in the basement, dark, damp, but equipped with everything necessary: a bed, a bucket, a toilet, a table with a strange machine. Later it turned out to be a sewing machine. Jaden even taught Peyton how to use it quite skillfully. Jaden turned out to be the kind of freak you don't want to argue with. Physically strong, abnormal. Peyton tried to run away several times, but the younger man easily twisted and immobilized her. Beal. The girl realized that Jaden wasn't even hitting at half strength. Later came the realization that it was best not to cross him. Jaden. If Peyton didn't fight back, he wasn't doing anything wrong. Every day the kidnapper brought the girl lunch and dinner. In the evenings, the man asked Peyton to read him stories. It was strange and scary. A grown man listened to magical stories from a thick book with his mouth open in amazement. Jaden also taught Peyton how to patch up worn clothes. He sold them in the underpasses or at the market. Peyton saw that as the key to salvation. The girl was good, and it seemed that she hid the notes in secret places in her clothes, closed them in the lining, put them in a button, and only found them under the collar, nodded the policeman, who had already taken a second drag from his cigarette. Well done. If it hadn't been for that, she'd still be in the basement, where Jaden would have killed her by now. Peyton's not the first person to live in this basement. Turns out she had predecessors. Jaden's dangerous. Very. Taking girls, making them read him fairy tales, fixing the clothes he sells. I don't know where he got the stuff. Maybe he stole it. Maybe he scavenged. Jaden fed the captives, took care of them, enjoyed his power over living things. And then he'd get bored with the next toy. He'd get rid of it and go looking for a new one. What a horror, Jennifer whispered. She couldn't imagine the horror Peyton felt, being in the basement alone with that monster. Now you realize what a scary man you stopped. The investigator looked at Jennifer seriously. The girl noted that he somehow unnoticeably for himself switched to you, as if this story brought them closer together, made them, if not friends, then at least allies. Peyton wasn't the only one who did the world a big favor. She could have ignored the note, thrown it away, and that was the end of it, or given up when the station didn't believe you right away. I know that story, how they chased you from office to office, didn't want to listen to you. It's scary to think if you'd given up and left. Jennifer nodded and shivered. It made her uncomfortable to think of people like Jaden walking the earth. They didn't stand out from the crowd. You never know if they're just a man or a beast. Peyton's dad, Clark. He found out about you too, and he wants to meet you. Why? It's got Jennifer all excited. I think he wants to thank you, the investigator said. And don't you dare say no. You deserve it. It turned out that Clark was here at the station. He had something to sign, someone to talk to. Jennifer recognized him as soon as he walked into the office. She'd seen him so many times in photos and videos. Now she was seeing him in person. Clark silently walked over to Jennifer and put his arm around her. It was unexpected. He hugged her tightly, in a fatherly way. This powerful and important man was so simple and natural. They talked for a long time. First, Clark talked about the state he'd been in during those months when his daughter had been in the middle of nowhere. It was obvious that it was important for him to talk. Jennifer listened, watching, nodding sympathetically. Then it was Jennifer's turn to monologue. She told the man about her financial predicament, about the used coat and the gypsy. At first she was hesitant to let Clark in on such details. Maybe he wouldn't believe her, think she was crazy. But the man did. He believed in the gypsy and in her amazing clue prophecy. He too believed that he owed his daughter's salvation to something inexplicable, incomprehensible. In a word, a miracle. Clark's cell phone was ringing off the hook. The man was obviously in a hurry, but he wanted to talk to Jennifer in detail and thoroughly. "You're a good, kind, decent girl," Clark finally said. And Jennifer realized that their conversation was coming to a close. Most importantly, she cared. And it was your caring that saved not only my Peyton, but a lot of other girls who would have been after her. I'm sure of it, and I thank you. Of course. You won't need it anymore. The gypsy was right too. I'll close your loan debt today and transfer the amount to you. Of course, money can't measure my gratitude, but I like to think that I did something for you too. Clark kept his promise. Only an hour later, Jennifer received a text message on her phone from the bank. When she saw the amount on the screen, she couldn't believe her eyes. Having such a fortune was something she had yet to get used to. Jennifer's life changed dramatically after she became a wealthy girl. The first thing she did was to quit her job at the supermarket and look for a job calmly and thoroughly. Nothing was driving her now. She was in poverty, so she could take her time. And she found a job. And what a job! First of all, it was legal work, which was Jennifer's profession. Secondly, it was remote. Thirdly, it was high-paying. Paradoxically, she'd started earning good money at a time when she didn't need the money at all. Clark's gratitude turned out to be not only a reliable financial cushion, but also the capital, bringing good bank interest. And then there was the paycheck. Jennifer could finally afford something she'd dreamed of for so long. She got her driver's license and bought a car. She got beautiful dresses, expensive shoes, and even jewelry. The girl thought about buying an apartment. She could afford any real estate in this city, but something stopped her. Jennifer wasn't sure she wanted to stay in Sports City. It had once seemed that having money was the key to a happily wealthy life, but it turned out that wealth was also somewhat of a challenge. Becoming wealthy, Jennifer was very disappointed in people. Close friends showed themselves not from the best sides. Jacqueline was the one who first distinguished herself. Of course, Jennifer immediately told her friend about what happened to her. Immediately after leaving the police station, she was so eager to share the extraordinary story she had been a part of. She was overwhelmed with emotion. Jacqueline took her friend's story badly and regretted that she had not been in Jennifer's shoes. She could use Clark's gratitude too. She'd been wanting a fur coat for a long time. A trip to the seaside and the latest model of cell phone. Jacqueline's attitude toward Jennifer had changed. Her friend had become more attentive, alert, and polite. Now she often complimented Jennifer, and before she had only made jokes about her appearance and behavior. Jennifer realized with annoyance that Jacqueline was almost groveling before her as a rich and therefore powerful woman, belittling herself and elevating her friend to make her feel like a real queen. Why? The answer did not have to wait long. On New Year's Eve, Jacqueline, in a pitiful voice, ordered a gold set from a famous brand as a gift. Even sent her a link to it. It was, to put it mildly, unpleasant. Jennifer still gave the bling to her friend then. But since then, the girl tried to stay away from Jacqueline. It was simply disgusting to look into her insincere eyes and listen to flattering compliments. No, it didn't feel like friendship at all. Jennifer suddenly had an epiphany. She remembered how Jacqueline had used her. Their entire relationship had been based on the favors Jennifer had done for Jacqueline. First, she'd given her an apartment and written her term papers. Then she'd babysat Jacqueline's baby like a free nanny. Now the gifts. Jennifer felt so alone, so weak and defenseless. She needed someone of her own. Jacqueline took shameless advantage of that. But when Jennifer needed help for the only time in her life, when she urgently needed money to pay off a debt, Jacqueline had refused her, even though she could have borrowed money and delayed the purchase of a new car. Clearly, she didn't have to. But still, Jennifer did everything for her on demand. It was a very one-sided relationship. So now Jennifer tried not to pick up the phone when her friend called and refused to have a friendly sit-down at the restaurant. These friendly meetings always followed the same script. Jacqueline ordered delicacies, dishes, and expensive drinks for the two of them. Then she would paint her unhappy life in colors, hinting at Jennifer to solve one or another of her problems. And after the bill was settled, of course, Jennifer would foot the bill. Jennifer now tried not to see Jacqueline and felt lonely and cheated. Yes, she had money, she had a good job. Now she could buy herself anything she wanted. But in a strange way, she didn't feel any happier. The novelty of the sensation was gone, and Jennifer felt the longing for her nearest and dearest people again. And there were none. The second part of the fortune teller's prophecy gave hope. Jennifer's happiness would be brought by meeting a man who was already looking for her. The young fortune teller promised love, marriage, and even children. Well, this man should probably be helped. The proverb that fate and fate will find behind the stove never liked the girl. Her nature was so active, energetic. What stove? In an effort to find her man, Jennifer went on dates with one of the cavaliers from the internet. She even had a long-term affair. Justin turned out to be sensitive and understanding. It was as if he read Jennifer's thoughts, anticipated her desires, saw through the girl. Later, it turned out that this was practically the case. Justin was one of the best graduates of the school, which trained professional catchers. They were taught how to properly communicate with wealthy women and achieve their goals through them. Jennifer was well aware that there were such educational institutions for ladies, but she was definitely not ready before a school for men. Jennifer closed Justin's loan and offered to help him herself, not realizing that she was being skillfully led to this decision, pushed. Then she gave Justin a motorcycle for the new year. This is the dream of her lover, speed and wind, the roar of the engine in her ears. The girl so wanted to make a loved one happy. Then she also gave him a considerable amount of money for business development. Well, of course. A man should feel like a breadwinner. Jennifer also rejoiced that her beloved now will be engaged in an important business. Find himself. Nothing with the business did not work out. The money disappeared. Jennifer then calmed down the failed businessman, urged him not to get upset. Yes, Justin really turned out to be a worthy student. He'd managed to masterfully bamboozle his lady. It was costing Jennifer a lot of money. The money she'd gotten from Clark was melting away like snow in the April sun. One of her new co-workers opened her eyes to Justin. Jennifer shared her happiness with acquaintances, showed pictures of Justin, told a lot about him. The whole office knew Jennifer's young man in absentia. "Are not your handsome guy by any chance last night at the club rocked?" Chloe asked one Monday, the girl from work who always handed Jennifer the documents at the beginning of the week. Jennifer then had to process them until Friday at home. "No, Justin went to see his mom yesterday. No, she's in a regional town and she's not feeling well. So he visited her," Chloe grinned, handing Jennifer her smartphone. There was an interesting photo on the screen. In the semi-darkness of the club was captured a passionate couple. Stylish, handsome Justin was holding a bright, dark brunette against him, and it wasn't a friendly embrace at all. Jennifer, gazing at the couple, tried to find proof that it was not Justin, but just a young man who looked like him. But it was Justin that Chloe had captured. He was wearing a shirt, which Jennifer herself gave him an expensive, stylish, branded shirt. Jennifer didn't confront Justin that evening. No, she didn't want to ruin the illusion of family in a warm relationship so badly that she procrastinated until the last minute. Still, Jennifer looked more closely at Justin now and began to notice details she hadn't seen before. That's how the truth about her lover came to light. Justin is a professional womanizer who lives off women. Before Jennifer, he generally was a 55-year-old widow of a famous businessman met. For him, there were no moral values, love, and feelings. It was hard to realize this truth. Jennifer felt unwanted and used. Justin was only with her for the money. Apparently, Jennifer was nothing in and of herself. Clark's money was the only thing that made her attractive to both her friends and young men. Jennifer found the strength to kick Justin out. It had been a little easier, but still the heavy thoughts now followed her relentlessly. She couldn't trust people anymore. Her best friend had turned out to be greedy and mercantile. Her lover was just an Alfonso. Everyone wanted money from her. It was like Jennifer didn't even exist, like she was nothing. The city weighed on her. She had to socialize with someone, smile at people, and wonder every time whether this or that person really treated her well, or whether it was all about her money. In the end, Jennifer came to what she thought was a wonderful decision. She would leave town. What would she do here? Her job is remote. Twice a week, Jennifer will be able to go to the office Monday to pick up the paperwork, Friday to drop off the processed paperwork. That's more than enough. And Jennifer will live in the house where she grew up, where she was happy. That's where she belongs. That's where happiness is. It is necessary to pause life, to take time out, to be alone with herself and her thoughts. A measured, unhurried reality, silence, no hurry and no fuss. It seemed to Jennifer that all of this would help her to recover, to regain her composure and peace of mind. And now Jennifer sits on her suitcases waiting for the gazelle. This is the apartment she's been renting for years. She came here as a naive student, full of plans for a happy, bright life. She leaves as what? A successful, wealthy woman or an unhappy one? Lonely and disappointed in life? Jennifer didn't know how to answer that question herself. Her father's house greeted Jennifer with boarded shutters and an oppressive silence. It had been a long time since she'd been here. She missed it. She looked at the cobweb-covered corners of the rooms. Then Uncle Brandon, an old friend of her late father's, came by. He'd recently been widowed. You could tell the man was still reeling from the loss. They sat and talked, and again from talking to an old acquaintance who had known her as a little girl, Jennifer felt warmer in her soul. Slowly the girl settled in her home. got used to the fact that in the evening from work here does not come Daddy, and Mom does not rattle in the kitchen pots. Jennifer felt like she'd made peace with their loss years ago. But it wasn't like that in this house. It was as if she'd gone back in time to a carefree, happy childhood. And that time, as well as this place, was firmly associated with her parents. So she had to get used to the idea that they were gone. Jennifer worked from home. On Mondays, she would go into the city to pick up paperwork, then process it all week, and bring it back on Friday night. Her schedule was calm, measured. Usually the girl coped with the planned amount of paperwork for the first half of the day. Then Jennifer had time for the garden. Suddenly she loved to tinker in the soil. She enjoyed tending the beds, growing unusual varieties of flowers, decorating the plot with lanterns, figures of gnomes and frogs. Jennifer also read, a lot, sitting in the garden in a big soft armchair that she had brought here from the living room. She had never had time for that before. Now there was, and Jennifer was eager to make up for lost time, devouring one after another of the books she had long wanted to read. And bad weather was no obstacle to reading outdoors. If it was cold, she simply dressed warmly and put on a blanket. If it was raining, Jennifer opened a wide beach umbrella over the chair and enjoyed reading to the sound of drops on the brightly colored dome. Jennifer chatted with the neighbor's Aunt Chelsea, Uncle Brandon, Grandma Samantha. There were hardly any young people left here. The village was slowly but surely dying out, sad. All of Jennifer's old acquaintances, her former classmates and high school buddies had gone to the city. There were a few guys who drank heavily and had no aspirations. Even Grace, the one who, according to Aunt Chelsea, had given birth to a baby by someone she didn't know and returned to her parents with her brood. Even she had gone to work. She'd left her children with her mother and father and had gone to Los Angeles to build her career and personal life. They talked occasionally when Grace came to visit her children and parents. Jennifer remembered her as a pretty little girl, big eyes and a trusting gaze. Now she was a grown woman, a mother of 3. "I don't understand you," Grace wondered sincerely. "How can you voluntarily imprison yourself in this wilderness? I can't even stand it for a week. I want to go to the city. There is life there. There are beautiful houses and streets. So much fun, just to walk along the embankment. It lifts my spirits. This place is a shithole." Jennifer just shook her head. She couldn't explain to Grace how good it felt to be in the middle of nowhere after the city, where she didn't want to talk to people who saw her as a cash cow. Jennifer didn't want to be alone in a crowd again, hoping and being disappointed, always in a hurry, trusting and being deceived. She was seriously considering getting a cow, or at least a goat. It would be nice to have a living creature in the house, and such a useful one at that. Jennifer had a cat, of course. It came to her one day, as if it sensed the landlady needed it. "Are you lost, poor thing?" the girl asked and gave it milk. Mirka stayed. From a skinny creature, this cat turned into a fluffy peach-colored beauty. During the day she walked somewhere or slept on the street, but at night she came to Jennifer and curled up in her bed. The girl joked sometimes that Mirka guarded her sleep. And maybe it was really so. Dreams in the village were good. Jennifer seemed to feel peaceful, happy. And yet there was something missing. More like someone. Mirka is good, of course. She's a great listener. Only trouble is, you can't get an answer out of her. And in general, it's so great to be loved and cared for by someone, like all those brutal, handsome men in the movies and TV series, which Jennifer had been watching a lot lately. It's just a pity that all this doesn't really happen. Love, devotion, tenderness between people. Jennifer was not a little girl. She had seen and experienced a lot of things. She no longer believed in pure, bright love. Sometimes she wished she could. One day, towards evening, Jennifer was tending to her vegetable garden. It was the beginning of fall. It was a wonderful time, her favorite time of the year, when the heat was no longer patronizing, but the first frosts were far away. and nature was blooming with some fantastic colors, and the air smelled of wildflowers and watermelons for some reason. The evenings were already quite fresh, so Jennifer wrapped herself in her mother's warm sweater. Her hair was mussed, and she wore work galoshes on her feet. After all, she was going to the vegetable garden, not the catwalk. Another advantage of living in the countryside: no makeup, no hairstyling, no need to look flawless. But on this particular night, Jennifer would have preferred to be dressed more respectably. "Jennifer, you look beautiful," came a pleasant male voice from behind the fence. Jennifer thought about it, her mind drifting off, as it often did now. And then there was this response. The girl slowly turned around and met her eyes with the man whom she had considered the ideal man all her childhood and youth. Although he was not a man then, of course he was not yet, he had not come out in years. In front of Jennifer stood Tom, the one whom all the neighbors set as an example to their children. All grown up, tanned and smiling. Jennifer recognized him immediately, even though she hadn't seen the neighbor's son in over 10 years. How could you forget someone who had been the object of your dreams for so long? She could still remember her heart pounding at the sight of his bright blue t-shirt flashing in the distance. Then the shirt had burned out, faded. But Jennifer still saw it from afar and hurried to that spot to catch a glimpse of Tom. Maybe even to say hello to him, to have a few words with him. Tom was like a heaven to her then. So handsome, so smart, and very confident in himself and his actions. Never had a word in his pocket. Always knew what to say and who to say it to. Tom went to the big city after school, went to university, and became a pediatric surgeon. That's what the neighbors said. He never came back to his home village. Tom's parents themselves went to visit their son and then moved to the city. The neighbors said that Tom bought his mother and father an apartment near his home. How lucky the Clarks are, the men said. The son has grown up to be a respected rich man, a professor, a doctor, and attentive to his elders. This Tom should now be in a big city and lead an active life of a successful man. How did Tom end up in this village? Here, near her fence, whoever, but him Jennifer certainly didn't expect to see. It was a fantastic moment, almost like meeting a miracle. Jennifer smiled, desperately hoping she hadn't gotten herself dirty, as she sometimes did. "You haven't changed much," Tom said as he approached the fence. Jennifer stepped closer to his companion as well. "You'll say the same," the girl smiled coquettishly. She knew she looked younger than her years. "Why are you here?" "I heard that your parents..." "Sorry to remind you." "Yeah, my parents are gone," Jennifer nodded. "I came here to live, to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city, to think about life." "I can understand that. Sometimes you wish you could run away to a desert island. Except my patients need me, and that's the only thing stopping me." "You're a surgeon, I hear." "A pediatric heart surgeon," Tom clarified. Jennifer involuntarily looked at his fingers. Slender, long, aristocratic fingers. You'd never guess that Tom had grown up in the countryside, and with those very hands he chopped wood, milked cows, and carried heavy weights along with the other village kids. "I'm a lawyer. I work remotely so I can afford to live here. So how do you like this life? Are you happy with it?" Tom looked Jennifer carefully in the eyes, and she simply could not lie in response. "Well, not everything, of course. Why are we standing here? Why don't you come in if you're not in a hurry? We'll sit on the veranda. I'll give you some tea with raspberry leaves. I thought you liked that when you were a kid." "I guess I still do," Tom smiled. He walked through the wicket Jennifer had opened. He hadn't drunk it for a long time and had forgotten the taste. They sat on the veranda under a rapidly changing sky. Jennifer turned on the lantern. Gnats and moths danced their eternal dances in its light. One by one, large bright stars lit up, the kind you could only see in the countryside, Jennifer wanted it to last as long as possible, for Tom to sit like this, talking in his sweet voice. He was so like family. Jennifer hadn't realized her childhood feelings were still alive. Maybe the only reason things didn't work out with other men was because she unconsciously compared them to Tom, and the comparison was certainly not in their favor. There were waves of warmth and acceptance coming from Tom. Jennifer could physically feel that he, too, was enjoying sitting with her on this veranda and talking to her as if they hadn't been apart for years. "You know," the man confessed, "you're the only person in the village who's ever been interesting to me. You were always so thoughtful and understanding." I'm glad to hear that, Jennifer said sincerely. Tom talked about himself. He lived in the city. He spent most of his time working, teaching students, and studying. Yes, Tom was always learning something new, improving his skills, practicing with experienced professors and surgeons. The young man managed to achieve a lot. He already had a reputation as a doctor to whom appointments are booked months in advance. Tom coped with the most difficult cases. Moreover, he specifically sought out such patients. He liked a challenge. When Tom talked about his work, his eyes lit up and Jennifer smiled. It was obvious that he really enjoyed what he was doing. Tom had found his way, found his place in life. He had come to the village to finally sell the house. He should have done it a long time ago, but his parents didn't agree. It's like a memory to them, I guess. Well, I can understand them. They've spent their whole life here. Tell me about yourself. There's not much to tell, Jennifer shrugged. Her own existence seemed gray, uninteresting. Olivia froze in the doorway. In the hallway stood another woman's boots, and from the bedroom came suspicious sounds. A banal situation, described by many TV series and book stories. Except Olivia never thought something like this could happen to her. On woozy legs, she walked to the bedroom and opened the door. She wasn't wrong. Ryan, her common-law husband, was entertaining a long-legged girl with a mop of red hair in their bed. A lump immediately formed in her throat, risking a desperate sob. But Olivia decided she wouldn't give these two the pleasure of seeing her tears. She turned around and walked out, slamming the door shut. As she ran out of the driveway, she gulped in air, breathing hard and trying to calm herself down. But it wasn't working. Tears burned the skin on her face. "How could he?" she asked aloud. Some passerby even turned around, thinking the question was directed at him. But Olivia walked quickly away from the house she'd long considered her own. "I'll pick up my stuff tomorrow or another day," she pondered, calming down a little. Though somewhere in there, on a subconscious level, she already knew that she would never return from there again. Tucked into a warm scarf, the girl hurried to the nearest cafe as a snowstorm was beginning to fall outside. There were dark clouds, and the wind was so penetrating that it chilled her to the bone. When she entered the cafe, Olivia was horrified to find her purse missing. All she could scrape together in her pocket was a coffee. No money, now without the man she loved. Sad, she thought, taking a sip of flavored coffee. It was good that she slipped her cell phone into her pocket, or she would have been left without communication. When she managed to warm up at least a little, the waiter announced that the cafe would be closing soon. Olivia shivered, looking out the window. The blizzard was in full swing. It had been a particularly snowy and frosty winter this year. She couldn't go home. She didn't want to look at the man who had betrayed her, who had trampled on her feelings. In addition to the phone in her pocket was a bunch of keys, one of which was from the door of her office. A plan of action was outlined. So Olivia hurried to her hometown publishing house, where she had worked for several years. "Who's there?" An elderly security guard asked. "It's me, Olivia." "I'm sorry, old man. I didn't recognize you," she replied. "What brings you here at this late hour?" "Uncle Adrian, can I sleep in the study?" Olivia asked in a voice shaking from the cold. Adrian had worked as a security guard at their publishing house for several years. He was a kind and jolly old man. All the employees loved him very much and called him just Uncle Adrian. "Oh my God, of course it's Olivia," he fussed. "How can I leave you out in the cold? Come in. I'll put the kettle on, you're shivering. You could get sick." Olivia opened her office, took off her down jacket and took a cup of herbal tea, carefully brewed by the guard. She valued her job very much. Ryan was part owner of this newsroom. Who owned the other share, she didn't know. Ryan didn't like to talk about such topics. He'd only once mentioned that he'd opened it with a friend who'd sold his share to a big businessman. But Ryan was the only one who actually ran the publishing house. Olivia, who had graduated from journalism school, joined Ryan's staff. Later, she even became editor-in-chief. She managed to quickly gain authority and universal respect among colleagues, because often had to take on the responsibilities of Ryan, and not only him. She was always trying to help her husband. And although Ryan hadn't proposed to her, she sincerely considered them a family. And a stamp in her passport was a mere formality. "That's it, Olivia. It's over. The man you thought was the love of your life turned out to be a scoundrel and a traitor," she said out loud and laughed nervously. The image of the betrayal kept flashing before her eyes. After locking herself in, Olivia finally let her feelings out. After crying all night, she didn't sleep a wink. It wasn't until morning that she dozed off in her desk chair. She woke up to a noise in the waiting room. "Open up, Olivia. Open up," Ryan shouted, pounding on the door with all his might. Her heart raced in her chest. She didn't want to open it, but she knew she had to. Olivia opened the door and turned back to the window. Ryan walked into the office without closing the door, even though the employees were coming to work at that time. "Why didn't you stay home last night?" Ryan asked. Olivia stared out the window in silence. She was afraid he would see her tears. Well, no, and they won't give him that much pleasure, Olivia thought to herself, clenching her fists with all her might so that her nails dug into her skin. Olivia turned, trying to look at Ryan with a nonchalant look. "I didn't mean to distract you, Ryan, from important business," she replied. Ryan stared defiantly into her eyes, but what struck Olivia was the complete lack of remorse or guilt in his gaze. On the contrary, he smirked cheekily. "Don't get all hot and bothered, chick. I'm a man, a male, so I can't wait for you to make time for me. You're tired, or you're working or something. What am I supposed to do? Are you saying it's my fault you brought some girl into our house?" Olivia found it hard to breathe. She'd assumed anything, but for him to turn it around like this was too much. She decided to end the conversation and tried to leave, but Ryan literally pushed her into the wall. "Where are you going? Do you really think I'm just going to let you go?" he asked defiantly. "Let go, Ryan. It's over. I don't want to see you anymore." Olivia tried to free herself from the man's strong grip, but she couldn't. "Have you been thinking straight, Lucky?" Ryan asked with anger in his voice. "You're worthless without me. Remember the mess I got you out of. Do you want to go back to the swamp you grew up in before you met me? Without me, no one will give you a job in this town." Olivia was silent, trying not to cry. Yes, she had no family at all. Ryan was the only person Olivia considered close to her at the moment. Her parents had been gone when she was very young. She was raised by her grandmother, who also passed away not too long ago. He knows how hard she's been taking the loss, and now he's hitting the hurt. "It's too bad that in so many years I didn't see you for who you are," Olivia said. When she felt him loosen his grip, she broke free and ran away, unable to hold back her sobs. There was a huge black void in her soul that made her feel hopeless. After running a decent distance away from the publishing house, Olivia stopped. Thoughts were jumbled in her head how to live now and what to do. She didn't know. She didn't know. She couldn't go back to the way things were, and she had to move out of Ryan's apartment. God, how could he? There was only one question swirling around in the girl's head. The thought of inevitably having to go back to the apartment to get her things was frightening. What if she met him there again? That was the last thing she wanted in the world. Sighing heavily, she wiped away her tears and walked slowly along the streets of stores and cafes. She decided to come back for her things later, when she had calmed down a bit. Olivia tried to rethink her life. Where had she gone wrong? Why had Ryan started cheating on her? After all, he loved her. She could feel it. It was true that he had changed a lot lately. He was often irritable, rude, and constantly late for work. Now she realized that it was probably during this period that he had taken a mistress, maybe even more than one. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about it while she'd been doing her best to help Ryan with his work and support him. He'd been having affairs with other girls and then coming home and getting into bed with Olivia, as if nothing had happened. As she approached the flower store, Olivia froze for a moment, watching the men pick out flowers. This store was high-end, one of the best flower stores in town. Looking at her reflection in the window, Olivia smiled sadly. Staring back at her was a sad girl with eyes faded and swollen with tears and smeared mascara. Turning away from the window, she quickly walked away, immersed in her sad thoughts and not looking around her. Just at that moment, a man came out of the store with a huge basket of white roses. Without looking, Olivia flew into him with all the speed she could muster. Some of the flowers scattered and she fell. "You should watch where you're going," the man shouted at her. But he gave her a hand to help her up. And at that moment, when he touched her hand, something happened to Olivia that she'd been trying to forget all her life since she was a little girl. Her lungs burned, her head spun, and her chest felt like it was on fire. She couldn't get up. Her body felt like absorbent cotton, and her arms and legs were unsteady. Only in her mind, one image replaced another. Olivia saw the man standing next to her, burning in flames in a black car with license plate 545. It's like the flames are eating him up. He's screaming uncontrollably. As if feeling all of his pain on herself, the girl lost consciousness. When she woke up, the first thing she saw was the troubled face of the man from her vision. "God, you scared me. God, you scared me. Do you need to go to the hospital? Let's call a cab," the man smiled amiably. "I'd drive you myself, but I can't. I'm in a hurry." And he took out his cell phone to dial a cab. "Please stay home tomorrow." "You're in danger," Olivia whispered. "You must have hit your head, and you still need to see a doctor," the stranger said. "No, I'm fine." Olivia stood up and realized she was on a bench at the bus stop. "Probably when I passed out, he carried me here," the girl thought. The man shrugged and walked toward a black car with license plate 545 parked on the curb. "Wait," Olivia shouted and rushed toward him. The man turned around, looking at the girl running toward him. "I realize you're probably going to think I'm crazy, but I'm asking you to listen to me. There is no way you are going anywhere in that car tomorrow. I implore you, please, or your life will be in danger," Olivia wailed, grabbing his arm. The man smiled, clearly confused by what he was hearing. "Would you go home, young lady? Are you really shocked?" He turned and got into the car. Olivia sighed heavily. He didn't believe it. Of course she would have thought she was crazy too if she hadn't known about her gift. Trying to get her thoughts in order, she wandered toward Ryan's house. She had to get her things. Olivia had a small apartment on the edge of town that she rented out to tenants. She decided to call them and let them know that she needed a place to stay. Of course, she was sorry to kick people out who were also very decent. After all, they had been renting the apartment for a long time and had paid for it faithfully, keeping it in perfect order. But nothing could be done. She herself has to live somewhere. Having called the tenants and warned them, the girl hurried to get her things. The tenants tearfully asked for time to move. They had recently had a baby in their family. They even offered to pay a month in advance. After thinking about it, Olivia couldn't refuse them. And the extra money was a good thing right now. The closer she got to the house she'd been living in for the past few years, the heavier she felt. When she reached the door, Olivia tried to gather her thoughts, afraid of catching Ryan at home, or, even worse, alone with her mistress. But when she inserted her keys into the door lock, she was stunned to see that the key was spinning and wouldn't open the door. I even had to check the correctness of the chosen key. There was no doubt. It was the right key. It didn't fit. Olivia sat down on the steps and cried quietly. Ryan had already changed the locks. Why would he do that? After all, she hadn't cheated on him, he had. The girl sat like that on the steps until late at night, waiting for Ryan, but he never showed up at home. Olivia wondered what she should do and where she should go. Sure, she had an old house in the country outside of town where her grandmother had lived. But it was quite dilapidated even at that time, because her grandmother had saved all her savings to buy her only granddaughter an apartment in the city. What happened to it now? Olivia hadn't been there since her grandmother died. After thinking for a moment, she decided to go to work. After all, Adrian was on shift again today. He wouldn't leave her on the street. When she got to the publisher's office, Olivia realized she was falling off her feet. She knocked. There was the sound of the door opening. "Olivia, I was told not to let you in here anymore. You'll have to excuse me, old man." Ryan ordered it, Adrian said in a guilty voice as he walked out the door. "It's been like that since you left." He went off the rails, yelling at everyone. "He told me to look for your replacement. But it's going to be hard for him to replace you. You've been pulling 3 jobs," Olivia asked with trembling lips. The guard sighed heavily. "I don't know what happened between you two, but I can't leave you out in the cold. Come on in. You'll spend the night in my den. We'll decide what to do in the morning." "Thank you, Uncle Adrian," Olivia said, sobbing. Her head was pounding, her heart aching with injustice. But as soon as her head hit the pillow, she fell asleep. Olivia woke up when the sun was shining, and there was a murmur of voices. She quickly cleaned herself up and headed for her office. To her surprise, it was open. Olivia hurriedly gathered her things, of which there were plenty. Most importantly, her laptop. Hastily throwing everything into her bag, she headed for the door. That's when Ryan burst into the office. "What are you doing here? Who the hell let you in here?" "You were fired yesterday," he whispered. "Don't worry, I came to get my things and get my paycheck." "Don't worry anymore," Olivia replied. The man standing in front of her now vaguely resembled the man she loved. "Get out, but put your stuff back," Ryan shouted. Curious people started peering into the office, but it didn't embarrass him in the slightest. "But this is my personal stuff. And the laptop is mine too." "Are you out of your mind, Ryan?" Olivia replied, clutching the bag to her. At that moment, a furious Ryan raised his hand to hit her, but the receptionist stopped him in his tracks. "Ryan, the CEO is in the office waiting for you," she said. "You're lucky." "Now get out," he yelled. "I don't know why you're acting like this. Apparently it's payback for my loyalty and love for you. Just know that no one canceled the boomerang, and all the evil that you have caused me will definitely return to you. You'll see." Olivia said loudly and ran out of the office, wiping away her tears. "Charlie, I'm so sick of this. I feel like I'm suffocating with hopelessness," Charlie said, sitting in the big leather chair across from his friend Stephen. "Buddy, don't exaggerate. You're the envy of the world. Stable business, income, the best girls. Your Sue is a beauty, you can't take your eyes off her," Stephen said, smiling. "But I haven't enjoyed it for a long time. I want a real, sincere relationship. And all these girls, including Sue, are only interested in the size of my wallet. Charlie looked out the window thoughtfully. Well, just the size of your wallet. Stephen laughed. You were in great demand at school because you were always considered handsome. Charlie stood up and walked over to the huge panoramic window in his office. Yes, it's true. He was always in demand with the female sex, and when the money came in, doubly so. The office of his firm was located in the largest business center, and the windows had a magnificent view. That was a prerequisite. Charlie was a true romantic at heart. True, he had to hide this feeling far away, so as not to be considered a weakling. After all, in business it's important to have grip, style, and toughness. Charlie owned a large media holding, which included the largest publishing houses and even a couple of television channels. I met a strange girl today when I was buying flowers for Sue, he said quietly, staring off into the distance. Was the girl so good that she blew your mind? Stephen asked with a smile. That's not the point. I didn't even get a good look at her. But I can't get enough of what she said. She begged me not to get in the car tomorrow. She said I was in danger. Stephen laughed. Sounds like the dudes are really bad. You believe in fortune tellers now? And gypsies too? We have to go to an important negotiation tomorrow. Have you forgotten? Yeah, I remember everything Charlie said. By the way, we have to stop by that publishing house we bought 2 years ago. They're complaining about him, the manager says. He's out of control. There's a rumor that he's embezzling money. We need to get to the bottom of this. The friends said goodbye, and Charlie drove home. Sue met him on the doorstep. She threw herself around his neck and said sweetly, "You're finally home. I missed you so much. I've been thinking about you all day." And she hung around Charlie's neck and kissed him. "Sue, stop it." "I'm actually tired," Charlie pulled away from her. "You're such a bore. Why did I fall in love with you?" Sue pouted playfully. "Did you?" Charlie asked, looking her in the eye. "What do you mean by that?" Sue started to get angry, and without an answer she continued, "You're always dissatisfied, always tired, as if you were some old man." Charlie went to his room, but before he got there he turned around and said, "Well, I'm not keeping anybody. If you're not satisfied, you know the way out, don't you?" When the door slammed behind the man, Sue was already complaining to her father on the phone. Charlie lay motionless on his bed and thought about his life. For some reason, he remembered his childhood, when he and his mother had lived together. It was probably the best time of his life. They lived in a provincial town, far from the bustling metropolis. His father left to conquer Chicago in order to earn money, but never returned. Mom worried a lot, but her son was able to bring up a real man. When Charlie graduated from school, his father suddenly appeared and offered his son to move to the city to study, promising to provide a good job at the end. As Charlie later realized, the father had already started another family. It did not work out, there were no more children. So the parent remembered about his own son. By this time, his father was not a poor man, so he wanted to involve his only son in his affairs. Charlie didn't want to leave his mother alone, and his resentment toward his father was great. But his mother insisted he go. Finally, the young man gave in. After studying at university, he went to work for his father. And as soon as a little on his feet, he hurriedly separated from him and opened his own business, which flourished every day. Sue was introduced to them by her father. The girl was the daughter of a former prosecutor, and although the family was short of money after retirement, they had a lot of connections. "Son, you can't go wrong with a hottie like Sue. The girl's the first beauty. Plus, she really likes you. And her father's connections will open doors for us." Charlie was enthusiastically urged by his father. And indeed, everything was going well at first, until Charlie began to notice that he was only acting in the role of sponsor. That there was nothing in common between them was needless to say. Everything was clear. His friends raved about Sue's beauty, but that didn't make him feel any better. Recently, she began to hint that it would be time to legalize the relationship, and his parents were pushing from both sides. Charlie was still hesitant to propose. Lately, he was leaning more and more toward the idea of breaking up. Suddenly, the image of the girl he'd met this morning came to mind. And for some reason, that memory brought a smile to his face. Taking out his cell phone, Charlie called Stephen. "Hey buddy, help me out. I'm going to my mom's. I've already made arrangements for today. I can't. I'm suffocating in my own house. Help me out." "Go to the meeting for me tomorrow," Charlie said. "Oh man, you're a piece of work. You've gotten so depressed," Stephen laughed into the phone. "But what am I going to drive? You know my car's in the shop after the accident." "No problem. Take mine. I'm going to take a cab to my mom's. I haven't been to her place in a long time, and I'm really looking forward to it." When Sue found out Charlie was going to his mother's, she made a disgruntled face. "I thought we were going to a club to unwind. What are you doing in the middle of nowhere?" she asked. "This backwater, as you put it, is my hometown, the place where I was born, and with which I have many wonderful memories. It's also where the closest person to me lives," Charlie answered. "Maybe you'll take me too. I'll finally get to know your mother. We're about to get married, and we don't know each other." Sue made her usual resentful face. "No, go out with your friends." "I want to be alone," Charlie said, turning away and dialing for a cab. He knew that his mother wouldn't like a girl like Sue. She was a sensitive person, and she would know at once that there were no real feelings between young people. She'd always taught him to marry for love only. Sue fought a little longer, but without her fiancé's approval, she went off to the club. Charlie, remembering that he was going to visit one of his publishers, decided to go there. Early in the morning, he could not sleep for a long time. His thoughts were confused, and something was weighing on his mind. It seemed as if his whole life was going down the drain. Yes, he had no problems with money, but that was not enough. He just needed someone who would sincerely love and support him, and whom he would love. Once he tried to talk to his father on this subject, but his father only laughed. "Son, leave such nonsense to the foolish poor. In our world, only the right calculations bring happiness," said his father. "But didn't you and Mother love each other?" Charlie wondered. "We did, and you see where it led. Domesticity quickly ruined everything," he said. "As I recall, it was you who ruined everything and left us for a lucrative party," Charlie grinned. "And as you see, it's been good for all of us. If I hadn't left, we'd still be living in poverty in the hole we were in. And now, thanks to me, you're a successful businessman with everything you want." My father stood up, walked silently across the room, and raised his eyebrows. "Don't tell me you regret it. Only foolish weaklings would say that, not my son," he said. Charlie struggled to keep from being rude to his father. He clenched his fists in anger, but he managed to restrain himself. He really didn't want to look weak in his father's eyes. All his life he had tried to prove to him that he could grow up to be a decent man without him. So he worked his ass off to build his own business and separate himself from his father. Yeah, the head start his parents gave him was priceless. That's why Charlie kept his mouth shut. That conversation had come up many times in Charlie's mind. Now, when he couldn't sleep at all, it came to mind. It wasn't until dawn that he was able to fall asleep, and soon the alarm clock rang. Remembering that he'd promised his friend he'd give his car to him, Charlie hailed a cab. 40 minutes later, he was already entering one of his editorial offices. But as soon as he entered, he heard screaming, and a crying girl ran past him, nearly knocking him down. In her, he recognized his recent acquaintance. The girl, on the other hand, didn't even look at him. "What's going on here?" he asked the receptionist. The girl looked around, fearing they were being overheard, and replied, "Oh, Charlie, there's something going on here. Ryan fired Cheryl, and she was the one who kept everything going. She's a great person, and most importantly, she's honest and helpful. And Ryan is... The secretary is a little hesitant. The staff dislikes him, you know." She waited for a reaction to her revelation, but Charlie didn't say anything, deciding to deal with Ryan as soon as possible. He didn't wait long. He came running a few minutes later. "Where have you been?" It's just this. I thought something had happened to you. You've got everyone on edge," Stephen yelled into the phone. Wait, what happened? Charlie wondered. It turned out that Charlie's car had been in an accident and could not be repaired. In the evening, going to do business instead of Charlie, Stephen remembered that he had forgotten important documents in the office, so he asked the driver to go and get them. But he got into a terrible accident in which he died. According to the preliminary version, the car was damaged brakes and gas tank. The car burst into flames. "It wasn't an accident," the guys said. Stephen continued. "You and I were lucky. Too bad about the driver. He was a young guy who'd just gotten a job." Charlie quickly jumped up and started for home. "Son, how come you're leaving already?" "You're leaving already?" "I haven't had a chance to talk to you yet," Cheryl said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I have to go. Mom, I'm sorry, I'll be back soon, don't worry." Charlie kissed his mother and ran to the cab. 3 days later, the official examination confirmed the speculation. Olivia had received a very small amount in the cash register, even though her salary wasn't that high relative to her employment and responsibilities. She had never asked Ryan to give her a raise. It was embarrassing in front of the staff, since everyone knew they lived together. It seemed to Olivia that by doing so, she was making a significant contribution to the overall family business. She loved her job very much. It was a shame no one ever appreciated it. At 2 on the cold train, time seemed endless, getting off at the right station. Olivia was being blown through the wind. It was a long walk. Calling a cab was useless. No car would go into the village in this weather. Pulling up her scarf and shoving her hands in her pockets, she followed the barely visible path. She was almost exhausted when the familiar village showed itself. Just a little longer, Olivia thought to herself, gathering her strength. Suddenly, she thought she heard a strange sound nearby. Olivia looked around and noticed a human figure lying in the snow. Cautiously approaching, she heard a man muttering. "What's wrong? Are you ill?" the girl wailed. The man said something, but Olivia couldn't make it out. Taking her cell phone out of her purse, she shined the light on his face. Paul. Oh my God, what happened? She recognized the man lying in the snow as her classmate who lived not far from her. They had been very friendly as children, and in their youth Paul had even confessed his love to her. After the grandmother reported that the guy went down a crooked path, began to drink. Now she realized that the guy was dead drunk. She couldn't leave him lying there. He'd just freeze to death in a blizzard like this. She didn't know who to call, and her phone was practically dead. Olivia looked toward the village. It wasn't far away. She couldn't get the man up. Tearing some bags and tying them together, the girl turned Paul over and laid him on top of the bags. That way there was at least some sliding in the snow. She just couldn't do it any other way. Her strength was leaving her, and her hands were starting to freeze without gloves. But after a couple hours, she was still able to drag him home. Knocked on the window of a neighboring house. Olivia saw Emily, his elderly mother. Together they carried him into the house. The woman thanked Olivia at length, trying to persuade her to stay the night. But Olivia hurried back to the house. The shriveled gate, the peeling gate, the peeling paint, all told that the house was uninhabited. When she found the key in a secret place, Olivia sighed in relief. They always left it there with her grandmother. The house was cold and damp, and one window appeared to be broken. There wasn't much firewood up the stairs, but there should be enough for a few days. Olivia quickly stoked the stove and went looking for something to fix the window. There was nothing in the back room except a piece of old linoleum. Deciding to make do with it for now, the girl began to work. After a while, the heat from the stove gradually filled the house. Olivia lay down on the bed and fell asleep. She woke up to an unbearable pain in her hands. They were an unnatural color. Olivia realized she had gotten frostbite. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Emily stood on the doorstep with a basket in her hands. Olivia, hello, Olivia. I'm sorry, old girl, I didn't get a chance to thank you last night until I put this one to bed. Did you run away already? I couldn't leave him out in the cold. Olivia smiled, embarrassed. You can come in, but I don't have anything to buy you. I'll go to the store today. To get some provisions? Yeah. Chiara, the clerk, won't open the store in this weather. The porch is snowed in, and there's no one to clean it. I've brought you some goodies. There's chicken, homemade eggs, milk, and cottage cheese. I've also brought you some herbal remedies. Let's have some tea. And the old woman put the basket on the table. Olivia took out the gifts and thanked her neighbor. Still, the world is not without good people, she thought to herself. What brings you here, little girl? And what brings you here, and even in such bad weather? Your grandmother told me that you've settled down in town. Are you well? Emily asked. It's just the way things are, Olivia sighed. She didn't want to give any details. After she said goodbye to her neighbor, Olivia started cleaning and making dinner. The house was already warm enough. In the old trunk, among the many things, she found her old tracksuit that her grandmother had brought her. Her grandmother always put things in the trunk, repeating that everything in life could come in handy. How right was she? Remembering her grandmother brought tears to Olivia's eyes. It was as if she knew everything in advance. There was a reason why she was treated warily in the village, but at the same time she was respected. No one knew about her gift, only her granddaughter. The rest of us could only guess. Her arms ached more and more, and her throat began to ache. In the evening, she began to feel feverish. There were no medicines in the house, only a decoction of herbs brought by a neighbor and some jam saved. Waking up in the morning, Olivia realized that she was even worse. There was almost no strength. The fever did not fall. The girl periodically fell into a dream. She dreamed of her grandmother and the carefree time they lived together. Her parents had died when Olivia was almost 7. The bus taking them to work had overturned and fallen into a ravine. Everyone survived except Olivia's parents. It was as if her grandmother had known in advance that this would happen. As an adult, Olivia once asked her why she didn't talk them out of going if she knew everything. It is not in my power to decide the fate of people, grandmother answered. We can't escape fate, no matter how bitter we are. Since then, they lived alone with their grandmother. The old woman took care of her granddaughter as best she could. She even managed to buy a small apartment in the city for her. The girl adored her grandmother, trying to help her in everything. Olivia learned about the fact that she also received her gift from her grandmother a little later, in adolescence. Visions were rare, but very frightened the girl. Olivia felt that everything was burning, but there was almost no strength to get out of bed. There was a knock on the door. Olivia tried to tear her head off the pillow, thinking that whoever was behind the door would definitely help her. The girl gathered the last of her strength and slowly made her way to the front door. The knocking was repeated. But opening the door, Olivia still could not see the guest, having lost consciousness. There were no numbers on the houses, nor were there any street names. Charlie had almost given up hope of finding his recent acquaintance, Olivia. He knocked on one of the few houses with a light on, hoping to find out something about her. The elderly woman who opened the door let him in. "I only know of one girl named Olivia that you might be looking for," the old woman replied. "It's mostly old people and people like my son." The woman nodded at the man snoring loudly on the bed. The smell of booze in the room spoke for itself. "Olivia saved my father from starvation the other day. Dragged him on her back when she found him in a snowdrift. Please thank her again for me, please. I can't walk myself. I've been sick for 3 days. It's hard to get up." Now Charlie knew the direction in which to go. When he found the right house, he noticed that the door was covered with snow, and only the slightly dimmed light of the lamp showed that there were people in the house. No one answered the knock. It took more than one knock before Charlie heard footsteps. But the girl who had opened the door fell senseless. Charlie managed to pick her up and carried her into the house and carried her to the bed. The girl's face was dead pale. Her whole appearance suggested that she needed to go to the hospital immediately. Charlie dismissed the idea of an ambulance, for it would not be likely to get over such a rough road. So he decided to drive her himself. The SUV he'd borrowed from his father could easily overcome any snowdrift. Charlie wrapped Olivia in warm blankets. He gently placed her in the back seat of the car and drove to the hospital. At the same time, he called a doctor he knew and received instructions from him. Charlie carried Olivia into the emergency room in his arms. The doctors were waiting for them. "Separate room, medication, I'll pay for it." "I'll pay for it. I'm asking you to help her," Charlie asked. "Don't worry. It's our duty," the doctor replied and slipped the bill he had received from Charlie into his pocket. The girl was taken away, and Charlie was told that he would be informed of her condition as soon as the picture was clear. All the way home, Charlie thought of her. Not every girl would risk her health to save some alcoholic, he thought to himself. Amazing, touching, and so defenseless. That's exactly how she seemed to me, even though I didn't know her at all. Olivia. When she opened her eyes, Olivia couldn't realize where she was. It was only after a while that she realized it was a hospital. The room was modern, well-maintained, the kind she'd only seen in movies. Her hands were fully bandaged, and a vein was filled with medicine from a nearby IV. How she had gotten here was unclear. The nurse who entered smiled affectionately. "Come to your senses at last. Now I'll call the doctor." With these words, she hurried out the door. The doctor examined Olivia for a long time, asking many questions about her well-being. Of particular concern were the girl's hands. "Well, Olivia, the condition has been stabilized. The pneumonia has been stopped with medication. Of course, while you need to be under observation until the full recovery of the body. Rest," the doctor finished and left. Olivia stayed in the room with the nurse who was changing the drugs in the drip. "Your husband is a good man. He brought you in his arms, raised the whole staff. He got you expensive drugs. Any woman would envy you. Besides, such a handsome man." "Oh, sorry," the nurse faltered, seeing the serious look of the patient. "Husband, you say?" Olivia didn't understand what was happening. Recent events had been erased from her memory. It was hard to believe that Ryan could take care of her, especially after what had happened between them. But then who? The next couple days went the same way as the previous one's procedures: injections, medications. Only the young nurse periodically brought gifts given by her husband. Each time she spoke admiringly of him. Olivia was dozing when Charlie entered the room. She had looked different in 2 days, her cheeks flushed, and her breathing was even and calm. Charlie had learned from the doctor that the girl's hands were badly injured and required long treatment. During these days, he had managed to learn a great deal about her. He had studied her files, taken from the personnel department in the newsroom, and talked to her co-workers. He wanted to touch her hand, but was afraid to scare her. Olivia felt his presence and slowly opened her eyes. She whispered. "Hi, I'm Charlie. We never got to meet," then he smiled. I'm sorry if I offended you. I'm sorry I said a lot of crazy things. You probably thought I was crazy, didn't you?" Olivia said. "That's the thing, no. I owe you one. You saved my life, you might say. I never believed in such things, but your words made me give up the trip. Your sincerity and persistence touched me. Thank you." Olivia was silent, unable to cope with the emotion, her breath hitching in her chest. His touch was like an electric shock. It was like something she'd only experienced when she'd learned about her abilities as a distant child. Olivia remembered how scared she'd been then. Her grandmother had calmed her down. She felt dizzy and slowly sank down onto the pillow. "You'd better rest for now and take it easy," Charlie said thoughtfully. "Do you want me to read to you?" he asked suddenly. Olivia nodded. The man sat down on the edge of the bed, pulled out a book, and began to read. Olivia didn't listen to the text, but his voice was so pleasant that it was hypnotizing. She kept silent, trying to get a glimpse of her interlocutor. Today he looked different from his first meeting. Then he was wearing a suit and a strict coat. Now he was wearing blue jeans and an ordinary sweatshirt. His hair was dark, medium length, neatly styled up. Charlie was smoothly shaved. The scent of his perfume was faint but very pleasant. Charlie came in every day. At first the conversations were few words and a little stilted, but in time they began to chat like longtime acquaintances. Common interests, views on life, sense of humor, and of course working in the same field did the trick. "How did you find me then?" she asked him one evening when Charlie was always around. He grinned. "It's a long story. I had to meet your former principal and get your address." "You talked to Ryan?" Olivia wondered. "Yes." Charlie immediately changed the subject, so they never returned to the conversation. "Olivia, good morning," she heard the doctor's voice. "I must tell you that tomorrow you will be discharged. The tests came back quite good. We'll give you a referral for further treatment at another clinic. Unfortunately, your hands aren't healing as fast as we'd hoped." The doctor said some more things, wrote some recommendations on a sheet of paper, promising to give all the other papers tomorrow at discharge, and left. The news of her imminent discharge, oddly enough, upset Olivia. She didn't want to go home. With sore hands, it was scary to get on with her life. Olivia realized she couldn't do it. There was no money to continue treatment at the clinic the doctor had mentioned today. The treatment she was receiving now, as she realized from the nurse's words, had been paid for by Charlie. This evening was the first time he had not come to see her. Olivia waited until after dark, but in vain. Sleep didn't come either. All sorts of thoughts popped into her head. After spending almost the whole night without sleep, in the early morning Olivia gathered her few belongings and went to the doctor's office to get her discharge papers. After picking up the discharge papers, the girl slowly made her way towards the exit. "Thank God, I thought I was late," Olivia heard a familiar voice close by. Charlie was standing next to a bouquet of flowers. "I'm sorry I couldn't make it yesterday. I got caught up in the moment. I had a lot of important things to take care of." "Sit down. We need to talk." Charlie offered to come into the hospital cafe and talk. Olivia almost threw herself into his arms when she met him. She'd never expected to see him again. When Charlie invited her to a table, he was slow to start a conversation. It was obvious that he was worried. "I talked to the doctor," Charlie began. "He told me that you need further treatment. And it's pretty serious. I don't think you should go back to that house in the village. It's practically uninhabitable. Getting from there to the city for treatments is unrealistic. And how are you going to support yourself at home?" Charlie paused. "I have an apartment in the city," the girl said quietly. I know that too. I know that too. And I know you're unemployed because of Ryan. The man was clearly tense. I have a business proposition for you. Charlie finally said, I'm offering you a job and a place in my house. When he said that, he looked at her questioningly. What kind of work? I don't really understand, Olivia said, confused. Her mind was a mess. Olivia, you're an excellent specialist in your field. I'm sorry, but I had to do some research. I have a very interesting project in mind, but I need the help of someone I can trust. That person is you. I have confidence in you, and you have the experience I need. So far, only a very small circle of people know about it. We'll discuss the details a little later. Charlie covered the girl's hand with his own. I have a big house. You'll have your own room and workspace. We'll go to the necessary procedures, so you'll get well sooner. He looked into her eyes. Think about it, because it's the best way out of this situation. I don't know. Olivia looked into his blue eyes and couldn't understand what was happening to her. After a brief pause, she finally decided to answer. I agree. She thought to herself, whatever happens. She didn't want to break up with Charlie, after all. He smiled and exhaled a sigh of relief. Charlie nodded, and they headed toward the parked car. It wasn't a Jeep, but a dark blue executive sedan. I've decided to change my image, Charlie laughed, seeing the question in his companion's eyes. It was a long way to their destination. All the way they talked casually, laughing and joking. But the closer they got, the more serious Charlie became. Finally, he stopped the car at the entrance to a private village. Olivia, there's something else I'd like to tell you. Charlie paused. Sue, my girlfriend, lives in the house besides me. That information hit Olivia like a cold shower. A lump formed in her throat and tears welled up in her eyes. I understand, Olivia said in a shaky voice. Don't worry, Sue doesn't know anything about work, so no one will interfere with your work. Olivia nodded silently and turned away from the window. Of course, she suspected that a man like Charlie was hardly alone, but deep down she hoped he was. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Charlie parked in front of a large mansion. He took the girl's things and gestured for her to follow him. The inside of the house was even larger than the outside, but to Olivia's surprise, the dwelling was quite cozy. She'd always thought such huge houses were like museums, devoid of coziness. But she seemed to be wrong here. They were greeted by a staff of 3, a female cook, a maid, and an elderly male manager. Your nurse will arrive closer to evening and bring everything you need for your treatment. Make yourself comfortable for now. Charlie smiled and walked out. Olivia sat down on the edge of the huge bed and sighed heavily. The room was decorated in light beige colors and tasteful furnishings. It had a shower, a toilet, and access to the balcony. Olivia also found a door leading to a small office that had everything she needed for work. The girl looked at her belongings, of which there were very few. Putting on her home kit, Olivia decided that she needed to pick up her things from Ryan tomorrow. But how to do that, she didn't understand yet. Toward evening, a nurse actually came to see her, treated her hands, and gave her the necessary medication. It was obvious that the woman was a professional. She was also very pleasant to talk to, which Olivia was now sorely lacking. When she heard a knock on the door, Olivia flinched. It was the manager, whose name was Vic. The man invited her to come down to the dining room for dinner. Olivia put on her house slippers and followed him. She was really hungry, so she didn't linger at the set table. Charlie was waiting for her. He smiled welcomingly, indicating the seat across from him. Can you forgive me? He asked. For what? Olivia didn't understand. For almost starving you, Charlie laughed. It's good for a girl to go on a diet, Olivia said. You don't need to do that. Charlie winked merrily, glancing at Olivia's figure. "I see you're having fun," they heard a woman's voice say. A girl was coming down the stairs, walking toward the dinner table. The cheerful mood quickly faded away. The girl came up to Charlie and kissed him. "Hello, darling. I didn't realize we had company. Why don't you explain?" she asked defiantly. "Yes, this is Olivia, my personal assistant. She'll be living in this house for the time being because of circumstances. And this is Sue," he said to the guest. But Olivia seemed frozen in place. She looked at Sue and couldn't believe her eyes. She had bright red hair and looked just like the girl she'd caught Ryan with. "Are you going to drag all the female employees into our house now? Or is this one special?" Sue asked cheekily. "My house, you mean?" Charlie replied calmly. "Olivia saved my life, so I owe her a favor. Would that be a good explanation?" "I'm sorry, I think I'll go to my room." I don't feel well. Olivia was heading for her room when she heard Sue's words. "God, Charlie, are you crazy? Look at her. What helper? Is that better in funny pajamas?" Sue laughed nastily. Olivia didn't hear the rest of the conversation. Her heart was racing. Maybe she was wrong about Sue. Maybe there were lots of girls with hair like that, and her imagination was running wild. A little later, Olivia had dinner brought to her room. It was late afternoon. She soon realized that she would like some tea. It was a habit she had had for a long time. She liked to drink tea before going to bed. They always did that with her grandmother, making delicious tea and having conversations. The only difference was that now Olivia was in someone else's house. Opening the door, the girl went in search of the kitchen. There was a dim light on in the house. That meant that everyone had probably gone to their rooms. Finding the kitchen, Olivia made herself some tea. There was a huge fireplace in the living room. The view from the window was breathtaking. Without turning on the light, she went to the window. The huge windowsill was just right. Olivia made herself comfortable on it and began to enjoy her tea. She thought of her grandmother at times like this, of the first time she'd met Ryan and how she disliked him. "He's not your man. Ryan's rotten inside, you know. Crying here with him," Grandma said. But Olivia, head over heels in love, didn't want to hear it. Ryan seemed like a prince from a fairy tale, her first love. After graduation, Olivia moved into his apartment. After renting out his one bedroom, Ryan got her a job in his newsroom, making her practically his right-hand man. As Olivia later realized, it was only that he shoved almost all of his supervisory duties onto her, taking advantage of her dependability and work ethic. And so it was. Olivia adored her job, doing Ryan's errands by day, and could spend nights writing articles and editing, fully immersed in her favorite business. To her, an inexperienced girl, such a family life seemed perfect. Immersed in her thoughts, Olivia didn't immediately notice the footsteps. "I'm not interrupting," she heard Charlie's voice close by. He was standing there with a cup of flavored drink in his hands. He was wearing a housecoat, his wet, mussed hair suggesting that he'd recently showered. She'd never seen him like this before. The man sat down next to her. "I can't sleep either," he said. "I like to sit in silence with a cup of tea before I go to bed, to think, to dream." "Me, too," Olivia sighed. "I also like to look at the night sky, at the stars. Evenings like that inspire me to do something new." Charlie smiled. "You're an amazing girl, Olivia. I've never met anyone like you before. Tell me, how did you know I was in danger?" Olivia had been expecting to hear that question for a long time. "I don't know how I did it. My grandmother had the gift of foresight, or something like that." "Sorry, I really should go," Olivia replied quietly, going into the kitchen. The cook made coffee and gave her some sandwiches. The girl took it all to her room, figuring she'd eat breakfast there. The residue of seeing Charlie's fiancée was not pleasant. But by immersing herself in her work, Olivia was able to distract herself from her thoughts. A knock on the door interrupted her. A maid brought in a huge bag and set it by the bed. "There you go," she said cheerfully and quickly disappeared out the door. The bags contained Olivia's things, but how? How had they gotten in here? After all, they were all at Ryan's house. Mentally, she had already said goodbye to them, deciding to buy her own things gradually. As she was going through her things, happy as a child, the phone rang. "Hi," she heard a familiar voice. "I hope all the things are there." "Hi. How did you do that?" "Nothing. I just called your former boss and offered to get all your stuff ready. Otherwise, he promised to fire me," Charlie said cheerfully. "Thank you." Olivia pictured Ryan's face at that moment and smiled too. Charlie wished her a good day and passed out. The girl put all the things on the shelves and continued working. She took her eyes off the monitor screen only when it started to get dark outside, and voices were heard downstairs. When she looked out the window, she saw Charlie walking out with his fiancée. Sue was dressed in a beautiful evening gown and her head was adorned with an elaborate hairdo. From the outside, the couple seemed just perfect. Two beautiful, successful young people. Olivia couldn't take her eyes off them. Charlie carefully placed his companion in the car without looking out the window, where a pair of attentive eyes were staring back at him. Her stomach reminded her that she didn't mind getting a refresher, since lunch had been skipped. So Olivia went down to the kitchen. Maid Jenny and cook Ciara, whom everyone in the house called Aunt Ciara, were already eating dinner. When they saw Olivia, they invited her to the table. "The master wanted me to tell you to be ready to go to the doctor's tomorrow morning," Jenny said. Olivia nodded. "An aromatic piece of chicken. Aunt Ciara, you're the queen of the kitchen. You've got to make something so delicious," she complimented the cook. "Oh, Olivia, thank you, my dear, for your praise. But not everyone is so happy," the woman grinned bitterly. "The owner's fiancé has been nagging me," Jenny explained. "The soup's not right, the food's too plain, too unadorned, or something else. And she's been giving me a hard time about breakfast. I don't know what to make." When the owner lived alone, he was always happy with everything, Aunt Ciara concluded. And when that witch came into the house, no one is happy. Jenny sighed heavily. "Listen," Olivia the cook said to her. "I've got this recipe for a delicious cold cake. The girls at work kept asking me to make it. I think it would be perfect for breakfast. I can share the recipe," she smiled. "It would be my pleasure, Aunt Ciara." Olivia cheered. After a little more chatting in the kitchen, Olivia went back to her room. Charlie and Sue came home at midnight. Olivia couldn't sleep, she was absorbed in her work, so she heard the sound of a car pull up. That Sue was cheating on Charlie was understandable. Except Olivia decided not to tell anyone about it. It was someone else's relationship, and she wasn't usually in the habit of prying, though she had a keen sense of justice. She'd been tempted to do it, but she'd stopped herself in time. Getting up early, Olivia got ready for her scheduled doctor's appointment. After applying discreet makeup and styling her long hair, she wore classic pants and a blouse, not forgetting her heels. There wasn't much time left, so she hurried to the kitchen so she could eat breakfast and help Aunt Ciara as she had promised the day before. Olivia did her job quickly, and it wasn't long before there was a full bowl of flavorful pancakes with her signature fruit sauce on the table. Now that everything was ready, she savored the flavored coffee, glancing at her watch, afraid to keep the driver waiting for her. Charlie showered, dressed, and went down to the living room, where Sue was waiting for him at the table. His head ached terribly. Last night had not brought the desired pleasure. Lately, going out with Sue had been stressing him out. They rarely ate breakfast together, so he was surprised. Surprised? "What made you get up so early?" Charlie asked. "I figured we didn't spend much time together. and eating together would bring us closer together. Besides, we're going to have to do it all the time after we get married, Sue said. The word "have to" hurt her ears. Charlie sighed heavily. That's beer, coffee, and chewing horse. Where's Olivia? Why isn't she at breakfast? As far as I know, she should be up by now at this hour, Charlie asked. Don't you think servants shouldn't be at the table with us? Sue looked at her fiancé defiantly. She's not a maid. I thought I told you she saved my life. So she's a guest in my house. And now I have to put up with this mongrel next to me. Have you seen the stupid pajamas she wears? How redneck do you have to be to come down to dinner in your pajamas in a decent house? Yes, I told her to eat with the servants and not to interfere with us, Sue shouted, unable to stop herself. That's right, Charlie pounded the table for the first time and raised his voice. In this house, as long as I'm the boss, I'm the only one who decides who sits at the table with me. And if you don't like someone else's company, eat somewhere else. Charlie got up and went into the kitchen. He found Olivia in the kitchen, chatting sweetly with the maid and laughing merrily. He stood in the doorway for a second. Olivia looked different today. Strict pants and blouse emphasized the advantages of her figure, and makeup and styling made the image unusually gentle. Olivia, Charlie called out to her. Come on, we have to go. Today I'll take you to the clinic myself. The girl followed him in surprise. Sue, still sitting at the table, looked at the transformed Olivia with surprise and anger. You look great. Charlie complimented her as they got into the car. Olivia smiled silently. It took them almost an hour to get to the clinic, and then they waited for the right doctor. When the doctor examined the girl, they were both quite tired and hungry. You see, the doctor said that the wounds will soon be completely healed and you'll be able to live like you used to, Charlie said cheerfully. Yes, thank you very much. If it hadn't been for you, I don't know what would have happened to me, Olivia sighed. Let's not talk about it. I'm just repaying your kindness for your kindness. Now let's go out to lunch, or we could starve to death, Charlie joked. They settled down at a cafe nearby. Charlie ordered a full multi-course meal, while Olivia had a light salad and juice. So that's why you're so tiny. Charlie laughed, comparing their portions. Lunch turned to conversation and discussion of work-related matters. Both of them acted relaxed and easygoing. What a strange thing to say. We haven't known each other very long, but I feel like I've known you all my life, Charlie said suddenly, putting his hand over her arm and looking into her eyes. It's as if fate had sent you to me to give me something light in my life. Why do you say that? You're a successful businessman. You have everything? Olivia wondered, her voice trembling, her heart beating so loudly that it sounded like everyone in the cafe needed to hear it. Charlie sighed heavily. Let's go. I need to show you something. When they arrived, Olivia marveled at the huge office building with its many adjoining structures. It felt like they were in a mini city. Do you like it? Charlie smiled. Yes. But I don't really understand what I'm doing now, which I got with the help of my father. And of course, he never misses an opportunity to remind me of that. Yes, I'm very grateful to him for the start in my career that he gave me. But, I want to prove to everyone, to him, and first of all to myself, that I am worth something. I've been thinking for a long time and decided to realize my media project. I want to launch several TV channels, an advertising agency, and a publishing house. I have a lot of ideas. And I want you to help me. No one knows about this but you. I want to keep it a secret. At least for now. You mean Sue doesn't know either? Olivia asked, stunned. No, why not? You two are getting married, aren't you? Olivia asked. Sue is far away from all this. She thinks money falls out of the sky, Charlie replied briefly. They stayed there for a while, looking around and making plans for where everything would be. They didn't get home until after dinner. Sue, watching them from the window, was literally choking with anger. Everything was falling apart. Charlie had grown cold to her, and everything was going so well. Sue ran out as soon as Charlie and Olivia entered the house. She threw herself at him and snuggled into his arms. "I've missed you so much. I haven't had dinner without you. I'll get the table set up. Olivia, I hope you'll join us." "I think I'd rather eat in the kitchen," Olivia said. "Please join us for dinner," Charlie asked. Olivia nodded, unable to refuse. Changing into her favorite pajamas, Olivia went downstairs for dinner. Everyone was already at the table, waiting for her. Sue glanced at her guest and tried to suppress a laugh, but it didn't go unnoticed. The servants set the table. "Jenny, I'd like for breakfast tomorrow those wonderful pancakes we had this morning. They remind me of the flavor of my childhood," Charlie said with a smile. "Charlie, I'd love to. Except I didn't make them," Olivia did the cook said. He looked at Olivia, surprised. "For all your virtues, you are a great cook." He praised her. Olivia smiled, embarrassed. "You're exaggerating. It's just that we never had servants. My grandmother and I used to bake something for tea. I love the smell of baking in the house. I think it adds to the coziness and warmth of the soul." "I didn't like the pancakes at all. Very greasy. I can't imagine how many calories they have. I wish you'd cut down on the baking, or Olivia would turn into a fat duck," Sue said sarcastically. The servants went to the kitchen, and those at the table at last began to eat, continuing their conversation. Olivia ate in silence, while Charlie and Sue carried on a conversation. "Olivia, where did you buy those ridiculous pajamas? Every time I see you in them, I can't help laughing," Sue laughed unpleasantly. "It was given to me by a very nice man, so it's precious to me. Unlike you, I was born into a simple family where comfort was valued more than showy outfits and pathos," Olivia said. "If you'll excuse me, I think I'll go. I'm a little tired." Olivia walked out and headed back to her room. "Why do you keep picking on her? Why don't you get tired of it?" Charlie asked. "I was just asking. I can't stand the whole hillbilly thing." "Yeah? Did you happen to forget that I'm from the country too? Are you making fun of me?" Charlie raised his voice. "Vera has an excellent education, excellent work experience, and a sympathetic heart. What can you do? Maybe you want to trade me for that provincial girl. I wondered what you brought her here for." "It's all clear now," Sue said. "I hope you don't regret it." With that, Sue left the table. Charlie couldn't sleep. Tonight he went to bed in the living room. Olivia wouldn't get out of his mind. It was easy and comfortable with her. He could be himself. He was also insanely attracted to her. They'd spent a lot of time together the last few days. He'd probably realized that she wasn't just a random person in his life. Charlie woke up this morning with a heavy head. There was a call from his father, who asked for a meeting in a disgruntled voice. It was going to be a busy day. Lately, communication with his father did not arouse positive emotions. There were only reproaches and complaints. That's why Charlie decided to start his own business and start from scratch. But no one could know about it yet, except Olivia. She was the only one he could trust. Lately, this girl seemed to him a ray of light in his gray, as it seemed to him, life. They were spending more and more time together. And every day Charlie realized that this girl attracted him more and more. Her simplicity and spontaneity combined with her enormous efficiency amazed him. She was so involved in the new project that she was literally breathing on it, offering many interesting ideas. After a quick coffee, Charlie went to his father's office. The huge building in the center of the city stood out favorably against the background of other business centers. His father liked everything ostentatious, unlike his son, who, no matter how hard he tried, liked simplicity in everything. "What's the emergency?" Charlie asked, stepping into the spacious office. "I won't beat around the bush. I'll get right to the point. Sue called me yesterday, complaining." Charlie paused and looked at his son questioningly. "Ah, that's it." Charlie grinned. "And you decided to act as a peacemaker from the province. Am I right?" "Don't exaggerate. I care about your fate. If you're doing something stupid, who's going to guide you but your own father? Don't you think the time for parenting is long past?" "I don't think so. Am I not the little boy you abandoned who needed you the most at the time? I'm old enough now to handle my own personal affairs," Charlie replied irritably. "Don't be silly, son. Sue's perfect for you. And her father's connections will open a lot of doors for us. Besides, the girl's head over heels in love with you. What more do you want? And what's this about some tramp you brought into the house?" Charlie stared into his father's eyes and said, barely able to keep from shouting, "That's right, not a tramp, but a very clever and decent girl, to whom you all have yet to grow up, and who to bring into my house is for me to decide." He stood up and headed for the exit, turning around at the door. "I hope we understand each other." Saying this, he left his father's office. I felt sick to my stomach. I didn't want to see anyone. Almost no one. Getting into the car, he drove to the place where he planned to organize his new project. Olivia was there, working hard. The girl was enthusiastic. Charlie saw her leaning over the papers and admired her. Surprisingly, she was the only person he felt comfortable around, especially lately. After pouring 2 cups of coffee, Charlie knocked on the door. "Can we not knock? You're the boss." Olivia smiled. "You were so enthusiastic. I didn't mean to scare you. Besides, you were so quick to get to work that now I think you're in charge." "Not me," Charlie laughed. After they drank coffee, they began to discuss the work. Olivia announced that she'd found some great people, including some from her last job. Plus, she'd arranged a meeting with the company that made the equipment they needed. "I've also designed the office space and prepared some sketches for you to look at." Olivia held out a folder. "You're a miracle. God sent you to me." Charlie walked over to Olivia and took her hands in his. She didn't say anything. He didn't take his eyes off her lips. The urge to kiss was so strong that he barely held back, afraid of the reaction. Suddenly, the phone in his pocket rang loudly. Charlie picked it up, stepping back to the window. Olivia realized from the pale face and the worry in his voice that something was wrong. "Mom's in trouble. The hospital called, and we need to go right away," Charlie said. "Of course, if you need help." Olivia couldn't finish her sentence. "I'd like you to be there for me, please." Charlie took her hand. She nodded and followed him, grabbing her outerwear. It took them quite a long time to reach their destination. Even though winter was coming to an end, the weather was truly wintry. Heavy snowfall was literally covering the road, paralyzing traffic in some areas. Charlie's phone rang several times, but he repeatedly rejected the call. Pulling up to the hospital almost at night, they went straight to the attending physician, who reported a heart attack in Charlie's mother. After describing the situation, the doctor authorized a visit in the morning since the woman was conscious. "There's no point in going back. The roads are completely snowed over," Charlie said to his companion. "We'll spend the night at Mom's apartment. If you don't mind, of course." Olivia didn't mind. She couldn't imagine her life without the man's presence. Strangely, not so long ago she'd thought she loved Ryan. Now she tried to keep thoughts of Charlie out of her mind because he had a fiancée. But it wasn't working. When he was near her or touched her, every cell in her body responded. She loved everything about him: his velvety, low voice, his scent, his smile, and his eyes. Olivia hadn't experienced that with Ryan. She liked him, of course, but she'd never felt such an incredible attraction, not even at the beginning of their relationship. And what was there to compare it to for the naive girl she'd been when she'd met Ryan? She'd never had a serious relationship before him. There was a convenience store in the building where Charlie's mother's apartment was, and they stopped in to get some food. The small apartment was unusually cozy and clean. Olivia noticed it at once. Charlie immediately changed into his homemade clothes, which suited him perfectly. A simple t-shirt and shorts looked good on his figure. Olivia admired him twice, trying not to give herself away, though her heart was ready to jump out of her chest every minute. The apartment was full of pictures of Charlie at different times in his life. As Olivia settled into the apartment, he began to prepare a simple dinner. "Charlie, would you mind if I took a shower?" Olivia asked hesitantly. "Sure, the bathroom's over there," Charlie said. "But I don't have a change of clothes." "I don't think anything from Mom's closet would fit me," Olivia said, even more embarrassed. "Maybe my t-shirt will come in handy." "You're so petite, it would be like a dress," he smiled. While Olivia was in the shower, she got even more excited when she imagined that they would have to spend the night in the same apartment. "What am I thinking? I'm already living in his house, even though it's full of people, and here we're all alone," she thought to herself. When Olivia finally appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing Charlie's t-shirt and a towel on her head, dinner was ready. Charlie froze when he saw Olivia, who had just come out of the shower. "You look good in my clothes," he said at last, not taking his eyes off her. "It smells really good," she said, trying to lighten the mood. "I'm not sure it's edible, but we have no choice," Charlie smiled. Surprisingly, it was delicious. During dinner, the tension eased a little. Charlie talked about the years he'd spent living in that apartment with his mother. For some reason, he wanted to talk about his difficult relationship with his father and his childhood resentments. Olivia listened attentively, not interrupting. Charlie was showing her a different side of himself now. After dinner, Charlie showed her the photo albums, telling her the stories behind each picture. "You were lucky to have had a wonderful childhood and a wonderful mother," Olivia said, thinking. "Take care of her. Family and loved ones are the most precious things a person has. I would give a lot to have my loved ones near me, but unfortunately it's impossible." A tear rolled down her cheek. Charlie touched Olivia's cheek and wiped the tear away. How defenseless was she at that moment? He wanted to hold her close to him and keep her safe. Instead, Charlie leaned down and kissed her. The kiss was filled with a tenderness and passion that both of them struggled to handle. Olivia responded to the kiss. The whole world seemed to freeze at that moment. Charlie picked the girl up in his arms and carried her to his room, never stopping kissing her. Laying her gently on the bed, he asked, "Are you sure you want to do this? One word from you and I'll stop." His husky voice was driving her crazy. She gently ran her arms around his neck, and without answering anything, she kissed him. This night was theirs alone, and no one else's. And the closeness was more than just physical. It was as if soul mates were joined at the hip. Charlie woke up in the morning and looked at Olivia sleeping on his shoulder. She was even more beautiful in her sleep. He hadn't slept much tonight, and he'd been thinking a lot. He had made the decision to break up with Sue. After tonight, it was foolish to continue this already meaningless relationship. He now realized that he had lost his head and could no longer live without Olivia. The phones on the table began to vibrate, trying not to wake Olivia. Charlie walked out into the kitchen, closing the door behind him. But immediately after he left, she opened her eyes. Her mind replayed the events of the night before, and she wanted to scream with happiness. Putting on a t-shirt, she wanted to go out, but the scraps of conversation held her at the door. "Sue, stop it. Mommy's in the hospital. I'll be there tomorrow or in a couple days as soon as her life is out of danger." Oleg disconnected. And Olivia realized with horror that she was just a casual hookup for a man who would soon be married. The morning was a busy one. For breakfast, the young people went to the hospital. Charlie visited the attending physician first, and then they went into the room to see Charlie's mother. The woman was weak, but very happy with her son. And when Olivia decided to leave them alone, the woman said, "You're glowing, son. I'm so glad you finally found love." Charlie held her hand and smiled. They stayed together for 2 more days until the doctor told them that there was no longer any danger to their mother's life. Early in the morning, they arrived home. "I'll talk to Sue tonight and explain that we have to break up," Charlie said as they entered the house. But his fiancée was already waiting for him in the living room. She threw herself into his arms, telling him how much she missed him. Throwing a dismissive glance in Olivia's direction, she kissed a confused Charlie on the lips. Olivia hurried to her room, but soon heard a knock. It was Sue. "You want to take my fiancé away from me?" "No, it's not going to work." "You know why? I'm having a baby, our baby, okay? And everything was fine before you came into this house. I think you realize that you're an extra, and you'll make the right conclusions." With these words, Sue left the room, leaving Olivia dumbfounded by the news. 2 hours later, her things were packed and Olivia was waiting for a cab. Suddenly, someone touched her shoulder. Olivia heard a voice unfamiliar to her pain. "Don't say anything, I need to leave." Sue's right, I'm redundant. And it's best for everyone. A child is sacred. I'll never get over it, Olivia's voice trembled. "I'm sorry about what happened. I didn't know, did I? But I want to be with you." Charlie looked into her eyes hopefully. "Sorry, I have to go. The cab's waiting. Don't worry, I'm not refusing to be involved in your company. But it's better if we don't see each other. It'll be easier on both of us." Olivia turned away and headed for the cab. Charlie stood there staring at the car that was taking his happiness away. Yes, he could leave Sue help her and the baby financially. But he realized that Olivia would not support such a decision and would not accept it. Olivia occupied her apartment, which the tenants had vacated the day before. From morning until late evening she spent at work, gradually setting up processes and solving many issues. She worked hard to keep her free time as short as possible. Charlie never stopped thinking about her for a minute. He knew a lot about Olivia from the firm's employees and followed her life. He knew that she was highly respected and valued by all the employees. It couldn't be any other way. Being at home was sometimes unbearable because of the presence of Sue, who was unpleasant to him. It was only the thought of the baby that kept him close to her. They were to be married in the next month. But he tried not to think about that, because every night he dreamed of Olivia, and in those dreams they were happy together. One evening, when he was feeling dreary, Charlie decided to visit Stephen to get his mind off it. The door of the apartment was ajar, so Charlie decided to enter. As he took a step, he heard 2 men shouting. The voice of one of them was Stephen's, but the other sounded vaguely familiar. "And what are you offering me? If you hadn't been such an idiot, it would have been just as I'd planned to blow up the car. You should have thought of that." Stephen shouted. "What was I supposed to do? You promised me money, and it never came. And then there were all those inspections. He would have gotten to the bottom of it soon enough, and who would have been to blame? You'd be above suspicion, of course. And me? You asked me to wait a little longer. He trusts me 100%, but we had to proceed with caution. And after the incident with the car, he's been watching everything and controlling everything. I had to lay low," the other man said. "Great. And now, after all the checks, they're going to throw me out on the street. Sue left me because I got her pregnant. She said she wasn't going to be with a penniless urchin. And that naive Charlie took her word for it that the baby was his. And with me in love, it's all about money. Anyway, either you pay me right now, or I'm going to go tell him what a good friend he has." Charlie entered the office. Both of them froze in amazement. Stephen's conversation partner was Ryan, Olivia's ex-husband. "I really thought of you as a friend, almost a brother," he said to Stephen. "That's too bad." He'd kicked Sue out the door that night, and in the morning his father had called, threatening to take the company away if he didn't change his mind. "Take it. I'm tired of being controlled by you. I don't want to see you anymore," Charlie told his father. "I'll turn things over to you tomorrow." Charlie disconnected the phone, took the car keys, and drove to an address he'd known for a long time. Olivia opened the door right away. "I'm sorry, I'm a fool. I'm not the one who got Sue pregnant. I can't be without you," Charlie said. Olivia was silent. A tear ran down her cheek.